Yeah, I always start with the early years because that's the most like cozy vibes anyway. That's the true fall vibes, you know? Fucking
before it all goes to shit.
Season 6, what the fuck? Like, Rory steals a yacht, bro. Like, am I watching GTA? A fucking GTA show? Like, what are we even doing?
Yeah, it doesn't really give fall.
No, it doesn't. It gives felon. And spoiled brat.
What is the feature-length podcast? Anyone?
The feature-length podcast is a show where three idiots talk about film and entertainment.
Good answer.
Hey guys, what's up?
Hey, are you talking to us?
Yeah. I'm talking to the voices in my head.
Like, I truly don't know. It felt like a fever dream. I swear to God, I could not.
It sounds so stupid hearing that.
If you're listening to this is a podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast.
Welcome back to the feature-length podcast, a podcast where we talk about movies and TV for a feature length of time.
Welcome back, everyone, to the feature-length podcast, episode 66 of the feature-length podcast. So I guess you could say that we're executing Order 66 on this episode of the feature-length podcast. My name is Marco, one of your usual co-hosts, and I'm joined by Dan.
Hello.
And Carolina.
Hello.
Today wraps up a very long selection series we've been doing on TV shows, but it's okay because this has been, for those of you following, the TV show season of the feature-length podcast, and I think now that we're done, the ones that we all had to, like, watch, you know, there's probably a couple other TV shows that we have already just watched independently we could record some episodes on to end out this year, so that's kind of fun. Yeah, exciting time. So we are talking about my selection, my choice, which was The West Wing, which is a TV show that ran from, one sec, I have the numbers here, from 1999 to 2006, which is kind of crazy because, like, even just in the feeling of the show, like, it starts off feeling very early 90s, but to think about the fact that it ended in 2006 is kind of wild. And there's some fun facts about where it ended and all that as well, so we will get into all that today. But yeah, the show is show ran by primarily Aaron Sorkin, although it's a pretty big collaboration between him and his longtime collaborator friend Tommy Schlamme, which is the greatest name of all time.
Hilarious.
And he has a huge part to play, and we will talk about like why he was so critical for the show and the show's overall success. So I don't want to like leave him out. This is very much a Sorkin production, but he was involved too, at least for the first 4 seasons, which is all we're going to be talking about. Because after season 4, Sorkin and Schlamme exited the show in interesting fashion, and famous ER showrunner John Wells, who is like a huge TV executive, whatever, kind of stepped in to showrun the remaining 3 seasons of the show, and end it in interesting ways, which we'll talk about, kind of the direction that the show went after. I'm the only one here who has seen the entirety of the show. I did not ask Dan and Carol to watch anything past the Sorkin years. So
thank you.
I know that'll be fun. It'll be fun to like reveal some things to you guys, and I can't wait to see like you guys' actual reactions to those things. So before we get into our general thoughts, I just want to say in this intro, again, for anyone that has listened to any episodes we've done before, we normally go like pretty in-depth with plot points and stuff like that, and even some of the earlier TV shows that we talked about, again, pretty in-depth with some plot elements. I think with this show, a large part of the conversation is going to be the more general, like, making of and some interesting facts sort of around it, as well as, of course, we're going to talk about the characters and our thoughts on that and, like, general plot lines. But if anybody wants, like, a very in-depth, like, episode-by-episode breakdown, I cannot recommend enough the West Wing Weekly podcast. Outside of Gilmore Guys, like, I would say those 2 podcasts are the definitive rewatch podcasts. And then even I would give the edge to West Wing Weekly just because of the fact that since one of the co-hosts was a cast member, like their ability to get, like, on every season they have an interview episode with Sorkin, and Tommy Schlamme comes on, and they do live shows, and they have cast members, and all basically the writer's room at one point or another, everybody has come on. So there is just so much knowledge there, and if anybody's interested, I think the process of like listening to that while watching the show is really, really fun, especially because like any show is a little bit of a time capsule, but like a political show especially, sometimes like an episode pops up and you're like where did this come from? Why are we really focusing on this thing? And then, you know, to have the podcast episode be like, oh, it's because fucking 2 weeks before this episode came out, this political event happened, and so the writer's room was trying to do a thing about it. So yeah, there's lots of that stuff that's really interesting. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about the structure of this episode, and I will now turn it over to you guys to get your general thoughts on the show. Whoever wants to go first, go for it.
All right.
I think Dan should go first.
All right.
Okay.
Hit it, Dan.
All right. So, I will say, just right off the bat, I liked the show, but I think I didn't love it for this reason. And it's something that I realized, like, while watching this show, because I don't watch a lot of episodic drama shows, which is very much what this is. Like, it's very episodic. So I think for that reason, I really liked the first, like, season and a half or so. I was like, I'm into this. I was watching it, like, consistently for the first bit. And then once we kind of got into the groove of, like, it's going to be, like, sort of a weekly, what problem does the president have to deal with now? I kind of started to drop that love to a like. I still like the show, but that was a big kind of, like, point against it for me. It's just a very subjective thing. I feel like if a show is episodic and not, like, a sitcom or something, I just find it a little harder to engage. But yeah, overall, I did like it. My favorite characters were CJ and Leo. I love them, like, pretty much everything to do with them. I will say, I started with the president as one of my favorites, but as it went on, I kind of grew to dislike him a little more. I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion, and we can touch on that more. But yeah, regardless of how much I liked his character or any of the characters, I think all the performances across the board were fantastic, across the entire ensemble, and the ensemble nature of the show was one of my favorite aspects. As someone who picked Lost for their fucking show for this, you know, obviously I'm going to love an ensemble, right? So that was great. And I just want to elaborate, like, while I didn't love every storyline due to the episodic nature, when I did, I really liked it, and I was really into it, because this show has some very intuitive takes on, like you said in the intro, Marco, like, on even some still relevant modern political issues and ideas and stuff like that. I felt like most of the time it still held up very progressively, the stances that it took. Not always. There's a couple instances that we can touch on later, and that's going to happen. Like, you know, the show is, over 15 years old from when it ended
20.
Now.
Almost 20, right?
Yeah, you're right, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's just that was my general experience with the show. Overall, really good, and I'll pass it off now.
Okay. Yeah, I liked it, kind of disliked it. Definitely, like, not a show for me, which I think will surprise no one. I think just the setting inherently made me not care. And it was just really jarring to watch it kind of today, when, especially in the US, like, we've seen the most shenanigans ever in the White House already. So then seeing some of the things that they considered to be, like, a big deal or, like, impossible, and, like, having that already have happened in real life, or something worse than that. You know, we survived a Trump presidency, so the craziest shit has already gone down in there that could ever happen. So that was kind of jarring. And I think, because it was almost 20 years ago, like, the things they were talking about, while the takes sometimes were, like, surprisingly progressive, at other times they were surprisingly not progressive, which I'm sure we'll touch on. So it was also kind of, like, whiplashy in that way, because it was interesting for them to be like, can't say that you like gay people, and also, like, we're gonna interrogate this brown guy who works for us because 9/11 just happened. And even though we're surprisingly progressive, we're gonna be racist as fuck, because that's just where we are as a society right now. So that was very jarring to watch.
We gotta talk about that. That's one episode we will definitely talk about, but continue.
It was crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. Continue.
But I did like, obviously, some of the characters, and some of the plot lines did keep me interested. It was really, like, waxing and waning for me. Like, there were times where I was like, I don't give a fuck about anything going on in any of their lives and anything going on politically in the country, so it was a slog for me to watch the next episode. But certain plot lines, like CJ's love interest with her security guard, loved that shit. Like, I think I needed more almost like personal melodrama, and because it was so political, I didn't get enough of that for me specifically to be interested. That's like a personal me problem. So yeah, I watched it. Sometimes I was into it, sometimes I was very much not into it. That's kind of my take.
Yeah, that's very fair. So I just want to jump in and say that I don't think either of your takes are either very off the money from like the general consensus of the show, even amongst people that like it. So I will say that, so everybody talks about like, oh my god, the prime Sorkin years of the show, like that's when the show was goated. And like, yeah, I mean, undeniably. And also I think had I made you guys watch all 7 seasons, I feel like you would have looked back on the first 4 with a lot more like, yeah, Jesus Christ, that was so much better. But I will say, like, if you're just looking at the first 4, my general take, and I didn't do a rewatch, just for context, I did not do a rewatch. This might start a rewatch for me, like this episode, but I didn't want to do one leading into it. My general take watching it as well, and it'll transition nicely into like, how did this even get made? Like, why? Because like Sorkin also like does not give a shit about, not that he doesn't give a shit about politics, but he's not like that guy. You know what I mean? Like, that's not his thing either. So my general take was, I think the reason the first 2 seasons are so much better, kind of what Dan was alluding to, is because you get way more of exactly what you said, Carol, which is like, it's more just about the relationships of those senior staff members and like the way that interfaces with their jobs and how it interfaces with their personal lives. And then even with the president, like I think the best arc that the president has is the whole MS arc, like in season 2, like that stretch at the end of season 2. But that's also like the most personal part of the show, and like the way that it relates to the senior staff and how they kind of feel betrayed by him, and et cetera, whatever, right? But then even some of the other, like In the Shadow of Two Gunmen, which is the season 2 premiere, like that 2-parter, which is like a little Sorkin refers to it as like a repilot of the show, because in a pilot you don't necessarily get to tell an origin story, but in like his mind he kind of like wanted to tell an origin story. And like, I feel like that episode is so great as well, to see like Josh and Sam and like what their background is and where they come from, all that stuff. Leo and the president, great, all that stuff. Like, all those dynamics I think are the best that they are in seasons 1 and 2 consistently. And then seasons 3 and 4, and we can talk about a lot of the real world stuff that may lead to why. I like 9/11 as part of it. Sorkin being busted for using copious amounts of cocaine is a part of it. Seasons 3 and 4 start to become a little bit more like focused on the issues. There's also an election arc that happens, so it being more focused on the issues is probably based in that as well. And not to say that you don't still get standout episodes. Like, I really love from season 4 Game On, which is the debate episode. I think that episode's fucking fantastic. Like, I absolutely love that one. And of course, Carol, you talked about the arc with the bodyguard. That's a really great arc that ends season 3 in a really nice way. But
a nice way?
Well, like a good dramatic way. Like, it ends it in a nicely dramatic. But then even the conversation like the president has with the guy that he's running against, and like that whole conversation they have to end, I was like, oh, this is so great. Like, this is, but that stuff feels fewer and far between in seasons 3 and 4. And then ultimately we get the exit and the complete downfall of what the rest of the show was, and the show becomes only about the political stuff, which is, and so just to echo your guys' opinions, like, I think one of the things a show like this has to do well to have longevity is not be about the political stuff. Like it can be about it, but it can't only be about it, because that stuff is always going to age bad. Like, there's no version of that doesn't age badly, because things change over time, and like knowledge changes over time, and our views on things change over time. And so, yeah, it is a little bit disappointing when it focuses too much on those things. I will say, though, like, to echo what you guys said on the other side of that, it was, I think, one of my biggest standout. This is a callback to the Mother episode of this podcast. Oh, God. Episode fucking 3 of this podcast, I think.
Very early,
yeah.
Yes.
Very early. And on that episode, I talk about how the thing that I hated was how, like, that movie just painted, like, a particular point of view as just straight up evil. And it was like, we're so much better because, like, this is evil. And I literally brought up The West Wing in that episode, and I said how what I liked about The West Wing is how even when there is like a political discussion happening, when the show's at its best, not all the time, but when it's at its best, it never feels like two fucking cartoon characters arguing about it. It really genuinely feels like two people, whether like regardless of what side they're on, actually making the best possible argument they can make from like an actual intellectual point of view and not just being a complete fucking dick. And I think that is how you get characters on the show that are so great, like for example Ainsley, who is a character that like I don't even know how that character works and is so great, because what that character is like should be so easily hateable, but like it just works so well, and some of that's the performance and some of that's the writing and whatever, so on and so forth. But that to me is what the show is when it's at its best. And yeah, I think when it's at its best, it's a really excellent TV show, and I obviously loved it. And I do think I don't think it's like I picked it for this because it's like quintessentially me in terms of it being a Sorkin thing and it being like influential and stuff. Yeah, is it like better than a Breaking Bad? No. You know, like I don't actually think it's like at that level of like the power of what TV shows have become. But I will say it does have my favorite TV episode ever is in the show. So, and I'm sure we'll talk about that when we talk about it a little bit later. Okay, so I want to give you guys a little bit of a story now, a little bit of a background story,
please,
on how this show got made. Okay, and then we'll transition into, we can start talking about like character breakdowns and season arcs and stuff like that.
Okay.
All right, so this story comes from this book. I'm holding up a book. It's a book of a bunch of screenplays from The West Wing. There's like 5 or 6 in here, and then there's like essays by Sorkin before each one talking about like some of the stuff that was happening. And yeah, this story comes from like the foreword to that book. It's also, I think they talk about it on the podcast as well, the West Wing Weekly podcast. But basically Sorkin had just made this movie called The American President, which I don't know if you guys have heard of or seen.
No.
I saw it on Wikipedia earlier when I was Googling the show.
So The American President, stick with me here, is a rom-com, which is crazy that Sorkin wrote a rom-com.
Okay, I should watch it.
Yeah, it's directed by Rob Reiner, which
I should watch it.
We love Rob Reiner, but I think it's because they worked together on A Few Good Men, and like so I think this was in Sorkin's like upcoming era, you know, where he's like writing a bunch of stuff now, and he's kind of like famous for A Few Good Men. And the premise of it is literally it's like that the president, like the first lady died, and the president is like dating someone now, and like, oh, what would that be like if the president had to date someone? But as a part of that, as a part of the research for that movie, Sorkin talks about how he was doing a ton of fucking research into like the senior staff at the White House and like how things actually work, because like people don't necessarily know that stuff. And so he describes that he had like his first draft was like a 300-page screenplay, and because it was just so full of like all this stuff, and so he took a bunch of shit out of it and they condensed it into like the rom-com that they went on to make. Okay, all right.
Did this movie actually come out?
Oh yeah, it exists.
Have you seen it?
Yes, I've seen it. Yeah.
Is it good?
Is it good?
No, I mean, I don't know. It's just a '90s rom-com. I don't know. It's fine.
Okay, well that sounds great to me.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe you should watch it and let me know what you think. I don't like. It's no When Harry Met Sally. You know, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not that good, but it's okay.
I didn't think that.
But also, like for example, Martin Sheen, he's in that movie, not as the president, but he's in that movie as a senior staff member, and like there's a few characters that jump between like that. Sorkin likes to work with a lot of the same people. Anyway, so a while after that movie came out, Sorkin gets a call from John Wells, who is a very famous executive TV producer, showrunner of ER. This dude is like TV royalty, like whatever. And he wants to meet Sorkin for lunch. And Sorkin's like not really thinking anything about it. He's like, whatever. The night before he's supposed to meet him for lunch, Sorkin and Akiva Goldsmith, who you may know as the Oscar-winning screenwriter of A Beautiful Mind, among other things, but he wrote the screenplay for that. Him and Sorkin are hanging out, and Sorkin brings up, he's like, oh yeah, I'm having lunch with John Wells. And Akiva's like, oh, what are you going to pitch him on? And Sorkin was like, what do you mean? We're just having lunch. And Akiva was like, no, like I'm pretty sure if he like is having lunch with you, it's because he's expecting you to like pitch him on something, you know, like you're like this up and coming writer and whatever. This is like an opportunity. And Sorkin was like, I don't know, I don't want to do a fucking TV show. Like I literally have like no idea. What do you? And so Akiva was like, you know what you could do is why don't you just, you know, like in The American President, there was like all those like senior staff members and stuff. Why don't you just do a show like about the senior staff in the White House? And Sorkin was like, I don't know, that's dumb. Like, would anyone want to like watch that? And he was like, I don't know, but like we're just spitballing here. Sure enough, Sorkin goes to lunch. They're having a nice lunch, and then John Wells is like, all right, so like you have any ideas? You want to do like a TV show about something? And Sorkin is like, how about a show about the senior staff of the White House? And John Wells is like, yeah, great, let's fucking do it. Write a pilot. Like, let's put it together. And so Sorkin, and he describes it in the book where he's like, every step along the way of the pilot getting made, he's like, please God, just let this show not happen, because like I do not have it in me to write this show. So he ends up taking a bunch of the research that he did for the American president that he threw out and like reincorporates that and makes it into the pilot plus a little bit of, I think it's episode 3 is a proportional response. Yeah. So in the American president, there's actually a line where the president of that show says like, oh, like someday somebody's going to have to tell me the virtue of a proportional response. And then like that episode comes out and it's literally all about that topic. So there's like, you can see kind of the connecting pieces there. But Sorkin reworks it into the pilot. The pilot goes out. It's like really well received. It's going through all these people. Eventually it gets to NBC, and NBC is like, no, we're going to pass on it. We don't want to make it. And I want to just read from you the quotes. This is just to set the stage of like the bullshit, like the way the studio treated the show and the way it like interfered with the show, and also partly is kind of like why Sorkin would end up leaving and stuff. But these were the notes on why NBC didn't want to do it. Okay? 1. Washington shows don't work. 2. Shows about politics don't work. 3. You can't have Jewish people on TV. 4. You can't have divorced people on TV. 5. What? You can't have people from New York on TV. 6. And this one, what? 6, Sorkin says is like, this is something that he's heard like before this script, but it's something that he's heard before. You can't have people with mustaches on TV. Okay? So that was like notes that he had kind of heard, and NBC was like, yeah, we don't really think we can do this show. And so Sorkin was like, thank fuck. Like, this whole thing has been a fucking comedy of errors. I did not want to make this show. Thank God.
Wait. Wasn't
Didn't
Seinfeld
Friends
on
have
NBC?
A person with mustache on TV? A very popular person with a mustache? Anyway. Whatever.
Anyway. So, ultimately, the pilot does end up getting made. And it does get picked up for series after many, many shenanigans. And yeah, that's basically the like origin story of like where this even came from. And then just a little bit of background about, I guess, like how it was all structured. As you guys probably see on all the episode credits, like Sorkin has teleplay credit on every episode. This is very Gilmore Girls-esque as well. Amy Sherman and Palladino and Daniel Palladino did it on Gilmore as well. But basically what Sorkin did is assemble a writer's room whose like whole job was to just literally pitch like story outlines, and particularly in this show to like research political stuff, like actually to go out and research political topics and then to pitch plot lines related to those topics. And then Sorkin would like funnel that through the characters into like episodes about stuff. So he basically wrote every teleplay. And then like the story process was more of a collaborative process. But so just to go back to that original idea of what the show was going to be, originally the premise was like the president would maybe only be in like 3 or 4 episodes a season. And originally they were looking at what's his name? One sec. I'm gonna look it up in the book. I will cut this part out. I forget the actor's name.
I also wrote it down.
It was a totally different vibe for the president.
Sidney Poitier.
Yes, Sidney Poitier for the president. And so a lot of what Sorkin wanted to do with the show is to be a bit more like progressive. So he wanted to have Sidney Poitier as the president, which obviously this would have happened before like there actually being a black president in history. There were supposed to be other cast members that would have been female as well that didn't end up happening, so those cast members got turned male. Sidney Poitier, he didn't get thrown out because he was black, but like after he ended up passing on it for some reason. The studio like was like really pushing hard for Martin Sheen, and Sorkin was like, well, yeah, I worked with Martin Sheen before, he's great. But anyway, so the whole premise of the show kind of shifted, because originally it was going to be more just like not so much about the politics and more about the senior staff. But then once Martin Sheen signed on and is obviously like a great actor and people love him and he has like this whole career leading up to this, they were kind of like, the studio was putting a lot of pressure on him to be like, no, like make him a cast member. Like, yeah, it's about the senior staff, but like the president should be there too, and like he's a part of stuff, which I think already there you can see like changes a little bit the dynamic, because once the president is a cast member, then you really do have to deal more with like actual political stuff as opposed to more of the shenanigans of the senior staff. And then also I think, leads into potentially why, as you guys alluded to, he's not one of the most loved characters on the show, even though he has some great moments, but it's because he doesn't fit. And then the only time they make him fit is when they give him like a really fucked up thing to do, which is great dramatically, but yeah, it's unfortunate. So that is the background and like how the show got made. And other than that, yeah, it's mostly just like a lot of famous actors auditioned / signed on for. People were really excited about it, and that's it. And it came out, and it was excellent.
It's interesting that you brought up like how the president wasn't originally supposed to be a main cast member, because, I mean, first of all, I'll just say like I did call this an ensemble, but if there is a main character of this show, like it would be the president. I think originally it's supposed to be Sam Seaborn.
Yeah.
Because like Sorkin being a writer, like he obviously he projected himself a lot into that character, maybe to a fault, like to a little too much sometimes, but whatever. But like it's interesting that you said that wasn't the original plan, and that every time I look up like or even just on IMDb, the synopsis for this is like inside the lives of the White House staffers, and like it really just focuses on the team of the like president's like what do you call it, like
senior staff
the senior staff, whereas in reality the president is in the vast majority of these episodes, and like I said, usually the main character of the episode, or like has the main arc, not always but usually.
It is. It's pretty interesting that the show kind of like pivoted that way, and I don't think for the better. I mean, again, not that I don't like Martin Sheen, and not that there's not really great stuff with that character, but it is kind of strange. And I think like if you really want a vibe check of what the show was going to be, it is the pilot episode. Like, and if you watch that episode, the president shows up. That is a
great episode.
Yeah, we can talk about it. The pilot, I think, is one of the better pilots I've ever seen. It's really, really great. But again, if you look at that, it's literally the last scene. The president shows up and gives like it's a great moment, but that's it, and then he's done. And that was supposed to like set the tone for the show, and then it very much sort of pivoted because of the reaction to that and to Martin Sheen being signed on and all those things.
I will say, in my research, I found that Tommy Schlamme was saying that Sidney Poitier just wanted too much money, but they were also paying Martin Sheen $300,000 per episode. So, like, how much more money could he have wanted?
Yes, yeah, and that's what I mean about like the official reason was, Sidney passed, but also like, okay, but is that why, or was the studio being weird about it? Yeah,
we'll never know.
We'll never know.
But yeah, and also like as much as I liked the pilot, I don't know if I could imagine that many series of the show without the president so involved, because either they'd have to not talk about the politics at all, because I feel like everything has to be run by him. Like, it would just be very different, and I don't know if I can picture it without seeing like a good chunk of episodes made in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it would be very different, but I think it would be... It's so weird to think about, because I think the tone would be a lot more what you had said, Kara, about what you wish the tone of the show was. Because I think it would be more like people being in relationships and like how it affects their personal lives. Again, you see that very early in the show. Like, one of my favorite...
Yeah, Sam dating a hooker.
Well, yeah, I mean, Sam dating a hooker, which...
Sex worker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole thing.
But they say hooker a lot.
Yes, they do. Well, it was the 90s.
I know.
So...
Okay, 2000s. Let's not be too generous. Okay, 1999.
The first half of season 1 was the 90s. And then
people said hooker until like 5 years ago. It wasn't like that recent that people changed up.
No, yeah.
But yeah, I think... I don't think it's the pilot, but it might be episode 2. There's that moment with Leo and his like... Well, becomes his ex-wife, where they're having an argument, and she says something along the lines of like, this can't be the most important thing in your life, and he's like, right now it is. Like, I'm literally like the right-hand man to the president of the United States. Like, I'm fucking sorry, but yes, right now it is the most important thing in my life. I feel like that is the tone of show that you would have seen without the president being involved. And you're right, it probably doesn't go for 7 seasons. It might not even go for 4 seasons, but I don't know. Is it a better show? Probably.
I think the solution is... It goes back to what we've said in all of these TV show selection episodes. Kind of the running theme is that ideally, if this was a show made today, like a streaming show or like whatever type of prestige show with a lot less episodes and just condense, like you could have the president appear less because there would inherently be less episodes, less like self-contained episode arcs, different stories you want to tell, or if you want to go for like the serial version instead of episodic version. Either way, I think it's just another case of a show that was made too early for what it was trying to be. And I really find it really cool that we were able to like kind of make that a running theme for all these episodes. We have one show that is a modern day streaming show, which is like more of an example of what could have been, and then we have a couple really long shows that could have used like a severe chopping down of the material. I think it's sort of another example of that. Like it's just there were obviously weeks where they were kind of like, all right, what are we going to do this week? Because it's an old network show that, you know, every week there's a new episode, and it's not just like, what story do you have to tell? It's like, what story do you have for us this week? That's the network speaking. That was my network impersonation.
That's pretty good.
Thank you. I've been working on it.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I think, it's just, the unfortunate nature of how these things go. But yeah, I totally agree. I think it's hard for it to always be at its best when there just has to be so much of it. And also when like one person is fucking writing all of it. But
that's pretty
that was his
impressive, right?
choice.
Like,
yeah, it is.
So that's really uncommon, right? That one person does the screenplay pretty much every week for every single episode.
Unless you're Aaron Sorkin and or Amy Sherman Palladino, who may be the same people. We don't know. Okay, they could actually be.
Know.
No, Carol, it could be a facade. I think it's a facade.
Have we seen both of the birth certificates?
Have they ever been in the same room at the same time?
Probably.
I don't think so. I have yet to see that. No, but okay, so to your point, Dan, it is very uncommon that one person writes everything, with the exception of like miniseries. So like something like Fleabag, which we've talked about earlier, like she wrote everything. But again, that's an 8-10 episode show. For this to be a 21 to 24 episode season show, and for him to write everything is pretty fucking crazy. And ultimately is also, by the way, and we'll talk about it, is like a factor of why he ends up exiting the show after season 4. Also part of the reason why Amy Sherman Palladino exited Gilmore Girls is because the studios were kind of like sick of dealing with them, and we can talk about the details of that. But at the same time, I will say on the other side of it, like, so much of the distinctive identity of this show like is Sorkin's voice as a writer. Same with Gilmore and Amy Sherman, and like with both of them. So when I watch season 5 of this show or season 7 of Gilmore Girls, and you see these characters like having dialogue be written by other writers that don't have like a distinctive dialogue style, and it's more just like, I'll call it serviceable dialogue, where it's like just getting the story done, and it's not necessarily in and of itself like an enjoyable thing for them. It feels fucking weird. Like when episode 1 of season 5 starts of The West Wing, and it's not Sorkin writing the dialogue, it is like it hurts my stomach. Like, not because it's not because the writer is bad, but it's just when you're watching Sorkin write that much dialogue week in and week out, and you're hearing these characters only speak it with like a Sorkin rhythm to it, and then you get to something that's not that, it's like, holy shit. Like, it really puts into perspective, because you can, if you're just watching week in and week out Sorkin do it, you're like, yeah, you know, it's good dialogue. But the second you hear those characters being written by someone else, it's like, it puts into perspective just how good and like distinct the dialogue actually is, like, and how it feels, and like how it helps the pacing. Those episodes without him writing are like, dude, like they are such a slog to get through. And even I think the worst of the worst episodes of the Sorkin years still have like an energy to it and a pace to it, just because of the way that he writes. Same with Gilmore and Amy Sherman Palladino. Like, there are some dumb plot lines that happen even while she's in control of that show, but at least the fucking energy of those characters feels like it's there, even while those dumb plot lines are happening. So I totally agree, though. Like, 10 episodes, you know? Just let Sorkin write a 10 episode show where it's not going crazy and he's not doing a bunch of cocaine, and let's just like dwindle it down to like the core elements. And I think that makes for the best version of this as well. I totally agree.
Also, I couldn't find a picture of the two of them together. Amy Sherman Palladino and Aaron Sorkin.
I'm telling you. Carol,
so
listen.
bizarre.
I mean, we already did this, but we'll relitigate it today, okay?
Yeah,
but like, the revival of Gilmore Girls has a Sorkin line in it. It literally quotes the "drop the."
Well,
The Gilmore Girls.
They
Drop the. It's cleaner.
Influenced by each other as writers of television.
Famous? Isn't Gilmore Girls famous for like always referencing pop culture though?
Yeah.
So it could be that. But it also could be...
It also could be that Aaron Sorkin is the ghostwriter of that show, yeah. There's other coincidences. But anyway, continue.
I just want to touch on... You were talking about the rhythm a little bit. And I actually think that was one of the main... I can't believe I'm going to say this, but one of the main off-putting elements of the show. And also part of why I kind of grew tired of it after like a season or so. A season and a half or so, is because watching these episodes back to back, which a lot of the times I would watch like 4 or 5 episodes at a time, right? And the dialogue, while very skillfully written, I did find very like tiring after a while, like because there was like no gap in lines, and I feel like that was all the cocaine. Like it did help knowing that he was on cocaine during writing this, because watching any other Sorkin production I've seen, like Social Network, Steve Jobs, even A Few Good Men, which was before this, and I'm assuming before the cocaine, because it was before he was like as famous.
I think it was like right around the start. It was right around the start of the cocaine. Yeah. So
probably during the writing process before the cocaine. Then I feel like all of those have like I have no problem with the rhythm he writes in with those scripts. It was really just this where I was like, this is too much Sorkin rhythm for me. So I do think it all boils down to the cocaine. Like I don't doubt his writing skill at all, obviously, as I've expressed his love for other productions of the Sorkin productions we've talked about on this. But that did get, like, by season 4, I was like, no one would talk like this though. Like no one would snap back with a response that quickly, and it just kind of felt a little jarring and unrealistic to me in a show that was trying
to
emulate.
They're working so long too. Like their brains are probably fried by the end of the day, and they're still like snappy dialogue, all the energy in the world.
And like in a show that's trying really hard to emulate a realistic setting of like the Oval Office and the White House, like that was very cartoony for me. I don't know.
That's fair. You're a lot of people have that problem with a lot of Sorkin's work in general. Is that they find... But
I will just say again, it's just this. Like I love every other Sorkin movie I've seen. It's
for sure. See, for me, what I think it comes down to, and it doesn't bother me in this, and it doesn't bother me in the stuff we talked about, but other stuff of his it has bothered me in a little bit. So, like he wrote another show, The Newsroom. It really bothers me in The Newsroom, and it really bothers me in some of the movies like that he's directed of his own. And for you were saying like you think the correlation for you is like the cocaine and like the level of like intensity of it. I think for me it truly is like how much control does he have over anything he's doing? Because when it's something like when he's partnered up with Rob Reiner or David Fincher or Danny Boyle, or especially in the early seasons of this, when there is like so much studio pressure and like Tommy Schlamme is super involved in the like process of getting it off the ground, I feel like when you take his stuff and you funnel it through restraint and like a separate vision that's not just his vision, it comes out a little bit better because it's like a best of both worlds thing. Whereas I think later in the show, the shows that he goes on to write after this, like the worst of it for me is The Newsroom. Like if you felt like in this show the juxtaposition of like this real world job with like this dialogue was silly, fuck dude, The Newsroom is like unwatchable sometimes, where I'm like, this is fucking weird. But I think the difference for me, why it didn't bother me as much with this, is because, and it could also be the time, like I watched this during the Trump presidency, as it did a lot of people went back to the show during that era. It had like a huge influx of viewers. That's when the West Wing Weekly podcast started as well. And I think it's because like they described it like this on the podcast, right? This show is political science fiction. Like it's not the reality of politics, but it's the way that people would like to imagine politics is, which is like, dude, what if a bunch of really smart people like cared and they were like really smart and they had like no limits and they just like tried really hard and stuff. And so for me, I think like the voice of it and the dialogue of it doesn't bother me as much in this because, and it could just be also the bias of like having seen the other stuff, and so I am grading on a curve. So like, yeah, maybe compared to like the Newsroom, which is hyper real to the point where they actually use real world things that happen in the news. Like this show, so many of the events of this show, fucking countries in this show are just made up. Like world leaders in this show made up. So because a lot of that stuff is, I don't know, it helped me disconnect a little bit again and go into that like political science fiction territory. Whereas with the Newsroom, it's like, oh yeah, remember this very famous news incident? Well, imagine if behind the scenes the news anchors were like acting like this. And I'm like, but nobody would fucking act like that. And we know how those people acted like IRL because this happened in the real world. So like that disconnect for me was way stronger. But to your point, yeah, like unchecked Sorkin is a dangerous thing. Like he desperately needs like limitation, and whether that's the form of a strong director or notes or whatever, like the second it's like I'm just gonna do whatever I want, and especially the more real the settings get, and yeah, it really does fall apart. It's got to be like a little bit of sort of like hyper reality. And I think even like the movies, when you look at the way A Few Good Men is directed, or Steve Jobs is directed, or The Social Network is directed, all those movies, because they have like such strong directors, kind of have a sense of like not actual reality to it. You know what I mean? Like they feel distinct and weird, and like Steve Jobs, the fact that it is like structured in such a weird way and that each thing is like so of its time, like each of the settings that it happens in, like the whole thing feels like a play. So the fact that they talk like that is kind of like, yeah, I'm not watching reality, I'm watching a fucking play. Social Network, obviously you have like Fincher's influence, which is like very dramatic, and it doesn't necessarily, you said this, Dan, on that episode, it doesn't feel like a Fincher movie or a Sorkin screenplay. It feels like something different, which is why I think that's probably the best thing he's made. Yeah,
plus,
but so
like,
I agree.
Mark Zuckerberg being a robot.
Yeah.
Like, the times where the dialogue does feel very energetic in that movie, it fits perfectly because it's
the character
that is
it's perfect.
That's
Totally.
how he would talk. Yeah.
Totally. All right, guys.
And it also,
yeah.
I just one more thing about like the rhythm. I think it's also why my favorite episode, and I'm pretty sure your favorite episode, Marco, that you alluded to without naming, is my favorite episode because of what happens at the end, which is like completely anti the usual dialogue rhythm. So
that
I'll
is
put a pin in that.
Also a factor in that being my favorite episode. We'll talk about it. It's all scripted, which is great. Like I have the script for it, and he talks about it on the podcast. Like there are so many moments in that montage that are scripted moments, but the fact that it is dialogueless is so cool because it's like it's such a fuck you to like the people being like, oh, Sorkin can just write good dialogue, and he's like, no, like I can like write like great moments without I just like writing dialogue. But yeah, anyway. All right, guys.
I don't know what episode this is.
You'll see, buddy, you'll see.
Okay.
Should we talk about now? Do you guys want to talk about characters first, or do you want to talk about like overall season vibes first? I'll leave that in your hands.
I think we should break down. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, could we do the overall seasons? Because I finished watching this recently.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find any recaps on YouTube. Because I've watched it across a long period of time because I didn't love watching it. Yeah. So like some of the earlier stuff I'm a little foggy on, and I couldn't find a good breakdown. So I would appreciate
Well, here's the problem.
A chat. What's the problem?
Because the show is episodic. Like hyperly episodic. There's not like a huge overall season arcs, but I will say, okay, so like to start
like
with
things
season
that happen with the characters.
Yes, for sure, we can do that. So season 1, obviously, I think we've touched on the pilot a little bit. Carol, did you enjoy the pilot episode? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was fine.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, a little. Yeah, I wasn't like this is the best thing I've ever seen. I can't wait to watch more of it. But like I didn't hate it.
Yeah, it's a good pilot. I feel like I usually hate pilots. Like I actively despise pilots a lot of the time. So the fact that I was even like, oh, this is just good, was like a step up for me.
Because usually a pilot is like, it ends up being so different from what the show becomes. It's just like, this is the core idea that we're going for, and like we can flesh it out in episode 2 and on. But I feel like with this and other shows that I feel like have a perfect pilot is like, not necessarily is it anywhere near the best episode in the show, but it's so perfect in what it sets out to do and what it like it tells us is going to be coming later. I mean, even though we said like the president just being at the end sort of isn't what the show turned into be, but like, or turned out to be, but I do feel like his relationship with all the characters that we see in that pilot episode, in terms of like them being friends and co-workers, and like just how cool of a president he was supposed to be until that kind of started changing in season 3 and 4. Like, at least for season 1 and 2, that pilot set the tone perfectly for me, and that's why I was like, wow, I am in, like, as soon as I watched that episode. So I do think it was a great pilot.
I should also probably explain that before I watched everything in the manner that I did, I was trying to watch it on a definitely totally legal streaming site. And when I went to like season 1, the first episode that showed up, I clicked it because I was like, that's the first episode. But it wasn't, because that like post 9/11 episode like didn't really fit in a season, and it just came out like before, I think it was the 3rd season or something.
Yeah, it was.
That was the first episode that showed up in like the season 1 category on the site I was on. So that's the first episode I watched of West Wing ever.
Oh, okay.
And I was so confused.
Yeah, that's
because I was like, am I supposed to know the, like, because it didn't introduce the characters because it wasn't the first episode. So that might have had an effect too, because I watched that first and it made me fucking hate Leo's guts, first of all.
Yeah, it's a bad episode.
And then I watched the pilot and I was like, okay, it makes more sense now. But I had like these preconceived notions of these characters that I didn't understand before I watched anything. It was so disorienting.
Yeah, that's fair. That would be very disorienting to see that episode.
Confused.
That episode is genuinely already a little bit disorienting with where it's placed, because there's like not a cliffhanger
outside the continuity.
But
sorry.
Like at the end of season 2, there's like this big pivotal moment that you're expecting to be addressed in the season 3 premiere, and instead it's like, let's do a 9/11 episode, which, yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it. But
yeah, so I do need to tell everyone that that's how I experienced the West Wing.
That's fair.
That's crazy.
It was crazy.
I think the first episode in season 1 that, at least for me, like the pilot obviously sets up, again, the vibes of what the show are going to be, but the first, I would say, like quintessential West Wing episode that most fans really, really love is the episode A Proportional Response, which we kind of talked about, where the president, so throughout the whole show, like one of the character sort of things that they give this president to deal with is the fact that he's supposed to be this like smart economist guy or whatever, who like hates the military and like has no respect for it and does not understand anything about it, and is immediately thrust very early in his presidency into a situation where this fucking plane with one of his people on it gets shot down, and so he like flips out and wants to like absolutely eviscerate the country that did it, and everybody in the Situation Room is like, bro, like you cannot do that, that's insane behavior. But this is also the episode that introduces Charlie, I'm pretty sure. I think this is Charlie's first episode, and Charlie's one of my fucking favorite characters. I absolutely adore him, and I think this is a great little like episode in terms of what the president deals with, the way that you see like the president and Leo's friendship. Like I think it really comes through in this episode, because Leo is the one that's like trying to talk him down and explain things to him and be like, bro, you can't do that. But then also there's a really great moment with Josh and Leo, because Josh is like, oh yeah, like this Charlie guy would be perfect to hire, but also like he's black. And Leo's like, yeah, but what's the matter with that? And he's like, well, wouldn't it be weird if like the president's assistant is black? Like, don't you think that would be weird? And Leo was like, dude, we have so many real fucking issues to deal with. Like, I promise you, like, that does not matter. Like, if he's the right person, give him the job type thing. Which is, I think, a nice little, like, not only a nice little character moment, but also one of the moments of the show that I think holds up as being, like, pretty progressive. And people, very early in the show, you see that moment and you're like, oh, okay, all right, you know, pretty good.
Pretty good, and except for them being like, this president is so nice, except he immediately flips the fuck out when he thinks someone he knows has been hurt.
Yeah.
And I literally wrote, I'm like, and they think that women can't be in charge of a country because they're so fucking emotional on their periods. I was like, fuck right off. That's why I can't watch stuff like this. I get angry.
That's fair.
And it is sort of a harbinger of what, like, especially the finale of season 3, I think it was, the plot line where he does that political assassin, like he greenlights political assassination.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, so that's where it was headed. which is why that's the reason I really started to like dislike his character, and like that was the point, I guess. That was his arc. I just didn't particularly like where that went when how the show started was supposedly, you see the pilot and you're like, oh, we might have sort of an idealized version of like what every president should strive to be, like something really a role model, and then we have the proportional response episode, which as an isolated incident I found really an interesting episode of like him going through this learning experience of how to deal with such a thing, being so new to the presidency. But then that is sort of what the road that he starts to go down in the later seasons. So yeah,
it's interesting. Like I think about this a lot because I kind of, especially as the show goes on, wonder a little bit how intentional it is, like, or if Sorkin's point of view is supposed to be like it's impossible to be a good person like in politics. You know what I mean? Because like there's like that age-old fucking saying about like not to get nerdy, I'm pretty sure it's like Plato who said it, but anyway, that like the best person, like the best leader would be the person that doesn't want to lead. You know what I mean? Like one of the qualities of the best person to lead would be like the humility to like, and to not have the arrogance to think that they would be a good leader, which is like a paradox, right? So I think I do wonder a little bit if Sorkin, especially since the president, which wasn't originally supposed to be in the show, because it was supposed to be about these people just doing a fucking crazy job, and then all of a sudden this guy becomes a character. I don't know enough about him politically, which is crazy because I watched him write 4 seasons of a show about politics. But like in terms of like his own personal politics, I don't know enough about him if his stance is intentionally a little bit it's literally impossible to be in a position of power and like not become unlikable in a way, because I also think that that's like maybe kind of true. Like when you look at, I think one of the cool things about the proportional response episode, like the ending to that episode, which is this big fight that Leo and the president have, and it ends with Leo being like, the president being like, but like why is a proportional response like the only thing? And Leo's like, because it's all we have, dude. Like, yeah, I understand it's stupid, but there is literally like, it's literally just the least stupid of all the stupid options. Like it is all we have. And that coming so early in the show makes me question and wonder like, okay, so is Sorkin's stance on like the presidency, not necessarily the senior staff, but like that figurehead of a person that like, yeah, it doesn't fucking matter who you put in there because the job like is gonna force you to do fucked up shit along the way. But then also there's a whole arc in season 2 where he like willingly lies about something that he didn't have to lie about. So that's the part where I'm like, well, then it's conflated, because like if it's just like the politics and he's doing like dumb shit politically, like he's assassinating someone because it's a fucked up thing to do, but like it's the only choice I have. Okay, like that's, you're making a broader stance about something. But to have that happen after he's already been shown to be like a liar and stuff, which as I prefer that arc of like, yeah, he's just a bad person. So I don't know, the two things get conflated, and I think it just speaks to like just not knowing what to do with that character as time goes on.
Okay, but I'm glad we're on the same page of the MS thing. Like that was as badass of a moment as he does get at the end of season 2, and I like how it's written. It was a really shitty thing for him to do, to lie. Oh yeah, to get into his placement.
Yeah, it's reprehensible, and it's weird because it's like, but don't make this show about, if you want to make the show about the politics corrupting him, then like make that show. But like, why are you also spending the entirety of season 2 being like, no, this guy sucks, or not that he sucks, but like that he's done a fucked up thing.
I will say Wikipedia says that the Bartlett administration experiences a scandal during the 2nd and 3rd seasons, being the MS thing. Yeah. And they compared it to the Monica Lewinsky affair, and I was like, I don't think it's the same very different level of bad or at all comparable. So I do want to put that out there. Like, yeah, I do think it's fucked, but I don't think, like, you should have been honest about it from the beginning. Yes. But I do think there are worse things. And as much as I can complain about him as a character, I don't even think he's like a bad person. Like, I do kind of agree that like that is a job in which you can't please everyone and you're gonna have to make some fucked up decisions. It like more so annoys me that like I think the show's view is like he is so kind and compassionate and care, like what a great president, other than the lying about the MS thing.
Yeah.
And I just don't think I ever saw that really often. Like from that proportional response episode, my take was, oh, I don't like this guy, and that carried from there on. But like just the internet seems to think otherwise. So
well,
that's my issue.
I mean, okay, but you also have to. I will caveat that with like, I think most of the internet's opinion on the show is during the Trump presidency, and so it was them being like, oh my god, like look at this guy, and like that's my president, and like everybody was wearing President Bartlett shirts, and the fucking West Wing Weekly podcast was a thing, and like so that's like a very inflated, I think, reaction
for sure.
But like to your point, and I think this is a little bit, and maybe this kind of, you know, start to tee up some of the frustrations that Sorkin had about this, like working on network TV, is like one of the things with network TV is this idea that they are very, very resistant to change, right? Because their whole thing on network TV is people are coming in every week to watch their characters do the thing that they know their characters are going to do. And so Sorkin has talked about like how much he loves Breaking Bad. Like he adores that show. And he's like, the idea of like the central premise of the show being a fuck you to network TV, and like we're going to take a character and literally invert him completely into like an unrecognizable version of himself is so cool.
It is so cool that like that one of the best shows, and depending on who you ask, the best show ever made, like a lot of people would say, was it like it was a prestige show, but it did take place on television. Like you're right, it was such a fuck you to its own medium. Yeah, so
it was. It really, really was. And Sorkin, like, so I know he is a fan of that, and I know a lot of his frustrations with this show was like this type of stuff they were pitching him to do, which we'll get into some of those notes, which are funny, and then some other stuff, which is like him not being able to do things. And so I wonder, and it could not be, I mean, it could just be the sloppiness of the writing, but a part of me is like, okay, like if this, again, to Dan's point, if this came out now, like would the president be allowed to, by the end of the show, like straight up be a bad guy and like be treated as a bad guy? And would like the central theme of the show be the senior staff watching this like jovial, nice dude who's like all about the right stuff be completely fucking broken down by this like impossible position for anybody to have until he becomes like a shitty version of himself? And like that could be very cool. Like that is a very
that would
cool,
be interesting.
And you know, and that's the thing that's frustrating is like I see the, like you see the glimpses of it, like with lying about the MS or with, but then it's, to your point, it's like then the next episode is like, oh, the president, isn't he just a boy? Let Bartlett be Bartlett. Isn't he just so sick? And it's like,
just a boy.
Like I think it's just the network TV of it all, of like you can't not being able to like double down into that that area, which is unfortunate.
It's a flawed medium.
Yeah, we'll come back to that because I have a little bit to talk about, some little kind of fun facts about like where this sits in TV history, this show, which we'll come to at the end. But okay, so also in season 1, we have a really great Toby episode, which is also the Christmas episode called Noel. I don't know if you guys remember that episode.
That's on my list of favorite episodes. By the way, I made a list of so many
perfect. So that's the one with him and the veteran, right? And he's like trying to help this veteran. Yeah, that's a really great episode. Again, I think that is one of those episodes that falls into the Carol category of like, it's just like a really great like human person episode, and you really like understand Toby a lot more. It's like a very endearing Toby episode, I feel like.
It is.
Is that called Noel?
No, actually I think Noel is the season 2 one.
What's the season 1 called?
I think, is it In Excelsis Deo?
Oh, yeah, it's In Excelsis Deo.
Because I have a fun fact about that one.
Oh, okay.
I just want to say, that's the one. And like, I just want to say, I think this show breaks the record for the most Latin episode titles I've ever seen in any show.
Yeah.
Like, why, though? If it was about a church, maybe I'd get it, but
why not?
About the White House? Anyway.
Well, because a lot of law was written in, like, Latin, right?
I don't know.
A lot of original,
I don't know.
Like the Magna Carta and stuff like that.
Let's just say it and canonize it into world history.
Okay.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes, Dan, you're right. Yeah,
Correct.
a lot of law was written in Latin. Yeah.
I took one law class in high school, and my last name is Law, so I would know, right? Like,
hell yeah.
If anyone here is gonna know.
Hell yeah.
But
yeah, that's a great episode.
the only reason I recognized that it wasn't the right name is because they won an Emmy for that episode.
Yes.
For the writing of it specifically, and the person who was credited as the co-writer got pissed because Aaron didn't let him talk in the speech, and he's like, part of the story literally is based on like my family. No, a guy named Rick Cleveland.
Yep.
But apparently the homeless veteran aspect was based on his own father, this Rick Cleveland guy, so he was pissed when Aaron didn't let him say anything, but Aaron is like, but I wrote everything. That's like, so of course I would be the only one to talk, and that was a whole little controversy.
It was a little
at the time
debacle. I heard about that story as well, which was basically, again, like what we talked about, right? That the writer's room was kind of just like throwing ideas out, and then Aaron would go and do a couple lines of cocaine and then turn out a screenplay. And when they won the episode, he went up and gave the acceptance speech. And I don't even think, did the other writer go on stage with him? I've never seen the clip. I don't even know.
I haven't either, but I just know he was pissed that he didn't get to talk.
So he was pissed. So it became a whole thing, and Sorkin was like, okay. Like, I guess, that did happen, but also I wrote the whole episode. But, yes, it was based partially on, a story that this guy gave me in the writer's room from something happened in his life. So I get it. It's frustrating. And I understand, for a 21, 24 episode TV show, to have one person write all of it is fucking crazy. It's crazy when Gilmore does it. It's crazy that this show does it. And it would be also, tough to be a writer in that, be in the writer's room in that situation and know that you're just throwing out ideas and somebody else is just gonna turn it into something or not.
But then you'd also at that point you'd kind of have to bring the whole writer's room up for the speech, in that case, right? Wouldn't you? Or
well, but the problem,
I'm sure he wasn't the only one that contributed to that episode in the writer's room.
So this is what Sorkin talks about. I've heard interviews about this as well. It's so who gets co-writing credit? Because Sorkin gets the writing credit on everything, and then they basically
he was credited as
he was the co-writer.
Oh, okay, that's different.
So which is different, but they've also talked about, and other writers on who went on the West Wing Weekly podcast who stayed with the show the whole way through, who were in the writer's room, also talked about how the co-writing credits were kind of just everybody got an equal amount of co-writing credits. So it was as the year went on, it was kind of who hasn't had one yet? And they would throw, because it very much was collaborative, everybody in the room. Obviously this is different because this guy literally pitched something or told a story from his actual life somewhat, and then that got turned. So I understand he got the co-writing credit and then he's upset about it. That makes more sense because it is a very personal thing, as opposed to if it was another episode that won and it was my name was just put on it out of union rules or whatever, then maybe you wouldn't give as much of a shit. So I think it's I understand why that dude is, why there was controversy around that and why he's upset about it. It makes more sense.
Yeah.
All right. Season 1. So outside of the finale, I don't have any other off the top of my head memorable moments or episodes. Do you guys have any written down?
Besides that, I just remember how you see Mandy for the last time in the season 1 finale, and then she disappears off the face of the earth.
So
which happens again with other characters.
I was going to talk about Mandy. Yeah, that is a very strange thing.
Yeah.
I wrote in my notes 2 separate times, where did Moira Kelly go?
Yeah.
I kind of forgot about her, and then I wrote I think in season 3 episode 10 or something, I literally wrote, I was like, oh right, what happened to her? And then later in my notes again I was like, what happened to Moira Kelly? Because I forgot again and was they just really never mentioned it.
So
yeah,
they're kind of,
and then it happens again with Ainsley. There's no goodbye or send off.
Yeah, so
I don't remember there being one, at least.
There isn't one. So what happened so it's 2 very different scenarios. We'll start with the Ainsley one. The Ainsley one, basically what happened behind the scenes was just that she booked another job, a full-time job, because she was just recurring and she was a lead cast member on another thing, and so she just had to leave to do that. And so she never really got a send-off episode. But it was very she loved being on the West Wing. Everybody in the cast loved her. She's been on the West Wing Weekly podcast a bunch, and very good relationship with everyone. Sorkin has talked about he was really sad to see her go because that character was supposed to be a one-off character, but the actress that came in and played her was so good that he was nah, fuck that. I have to keep writing stuff for her to be in because she's fucking awesome. So that was a sad leaving. Moira, that character, it's
Moira's her real name.
Yeah. Mandy, played by Moira.
Yeah.
Hated being on the show. hated everyone. Nobody liked her. She was like, it was very like, from day one, like she did not want to be there, and basically left the show with like a very bad taste in her mouth. And everyone was like, all right, dude. And so that's why she didn't get a send off, is she just didn't like renew her contract and was like, fuck this, I don't want to be here anymore. And then went on to, I don't know, what did she do after? Does anybody know?
One Tree Hill. Not immediately after, but at one point.
Interesting.
That's why I know her.
Cool.
Yeah.
So very different like vibes of people leaving the show, but yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what else happened in season 1, other than Sam dating that girl.
Season 1 was very episodic, except for what happens at the end of the finale,
which we can talk about.
Yeah, and I like that episode a lot because it starts out as just another, like he's going to give another speech, and then it's really just like the final scene of like, I think it's also a non-linear timeline if I remember correctly.
I think so.
Right. And then I don't want to take the experience of revealing it from you, Marco. It's your selection episode.
Yeah,
but then something crazy happens.
Assassination attempt. Uh-oh.
Hell yeah.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
So let's talk about this a little bit now before we transition elsewhere. So,
okay.
From the moment that this show became like a moderate success, like early in season 1, every studio note Sorkin started getting, and he's talked about this, was like insufferably stupid. Like every studio note was like, for example, so one of my favorite characters on the show is Dr. Bartlett, who's played by Stockard Channing, who's the first lady. She's great. The moment she was introduced, Sorkin talks about how like every note he got was like, can she like die in a plane crash and then the president can like start dating and like that can be a thing? And Sorkin was like,
they're just trying to remake that
literally just remake the American president. And Sorkin was like, bro, like what are you fucking talking about? Like, no, I'm not gonna do that. But so much pressure to have like assassination attempts and all this like crazy stuff. And Sorkin's whole thing he was constantly pushing back on was like, guys, like this show is at its best when it's just the characters we like vibing. It's just, he's like, I understand it's a show about the presidency, but like just think of it as any workplace drama. It's just about the characters going to their job, but we care about the characters. Like we don't need fucking assassination attempts and plane crashes and all this crazy stuff. But eventually getting to the end of the season, he was like, yeah, like it's nice at the end of a season to do something big and to leave yourself something to come back to. He was like, he's talks about something that he hates is like getting to the end, it being done, and then if everything is wrapped up in a nice bow, that when you like start the next season after a summer off or whatever, like to try and get the gears turning about what you can write about is like such a pain in the ass. So he was like, I really like ending seasons with like a fucking thing, and that way I have something to address at the start of season 2, so I don't feel like I'm starting from a blank page. And so he finally was like, yeah, fine, fuck it, end of the season, we can do an assassination attempt. But even still, he was like, I didn't want it to be about that. I wanted it to be more about like this moment, and then we can use that to like do something more interesting in season 2 rather than have it turn into like an action show, because like that's not anything that this show is about
until the season 4 finale.
Which we'll talk about.
That was a crazy episode.
But even with the assassination, I was like, this is cool, like a nice change of pace. But I was like, they're obviously not going to have the bullets successfully hit the president. And then it turns out he also was hit. Like, we find out Josh was hit and the president was hit. It's pretty big.
It is. It's pretty cool. It's a lot of tension. So the season premiere of season 2 is In the Shadow of Two Gunmen, part 1 and 2. It's like it's almost like and Sorkin, and it's in the screenplay book, and he's talked about it, but like he basically just wrote it as a movie. He was like, how can I just write like an hour and a half like origin story for everyone and frame it around like using flashbacks in this kind of like non-linear way.
It's like Lost.
It's very Lost, and it's very fucking cool. I love this. I think the season 2 premiere, it might be my favorite premiere of any of the seasons that Sorkin wrote. I can't think of a better.
Yeah, I think me too.
It's great.
Yeah, I liked it as well.
Yeah, how'd you guys feel about like the origin story of like Sam and Josh and all that? Did you vibe with it?
It was
Did
cool.
You get into it?
I like that, and how CJ and Toby knew each other before this whole thing. Like before we got the origin, I just expected they all met like when they formed the team in their like election campaign and whatnot. But then this is also the episode, I think, where like is this the episode or a different episode where we also see the timeline go up to when they're forming the campaign team, and like they have their little campaign office and stuff like that, and the people who haven't met before are meeting for the first time.
That
Donna's in it too.
I think that might be this episode. I haven't seen it in a while. I don't remember, but
okay.
In my head, it all runs together. Yeah.
Flashback episodes in this show, I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I know when, oh God, what's his name? Toss out all the names. Give me names.
Leo.
Josh.
Okay.
When Josh's dad died or got sick or whatever, I know that was like an opportunity for some flashbacks too. I did definitely like, I think, the assassination attempt to giving that like opportunity for backstory, especially because I think I was missing that like through the whole first season too.
Because you started with an episode from technically
season 3. So I was waiting for that intro for a whole season.
Exactly.
So I appreciated it.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, and another one was when Leo is like on trial defending the president's MS scandal. I think that turns into a flashback episode of when they first meet or first start their like partnership. Because Leo was originally going to run for president, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think
that mentioned.
It was the original thing, but yeah, he ends up pushing Jed to run.
Let's be honest though, outside of the self-contained 9/11 episode, like Leo's the real hero.
I love Leo. Like, I think
the leader
Leo
of the team.
Yeah, Leo is so sweet, and everybody has nothing but great things to say about that actor, and like shit that happens to that actor later is very sad, and like we'll touch on it, but yeah, I think he's a really great character as well, and I love him. I love him as a part of the senior staff. I think he's a good leader too.
Yeah.
Definitely better than Jed.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, season 2's got some bangers in it, episode wise. So this is one of the few seasons that I feel like truly has like an arc to it, and so this is the MS season, obviously.
Yes.
Which has some absolutely incredible episodes. This is also the season that introduces Ainsley, as we talked about. Ainsley's introductory episode, I think, is great. An underrated one from this season that I don't hear people talk about a lot, but I really like is it's the Sam episode. Somebody's going to emergency, somebody's going to jail.
Oh yeah.
I think that's just like a
With
really nice character episode where he finds out that his dad's been cheating or whatever. Is that what the episode? Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Is this also the season where with the Supreme Court judge plotline? Season 3, maybe.
It might be. I don't remember.
Am I jumping ahead?
It might be.
Okay, if
we
it
can talk about it here.
Either way, that was a good episode too. Where they're like, that episode starts with like Josh running through the bullpen and stuff, and he's like celebrating this huge victory, and we don't know what the context is yet, and then it's revealed that they landed a seat on the Supreme Court, which is huge. Like when your party lands a seat on the Supreme Court, and then it like cuts the intro, and I felt the energy of that whole like cold open was like awesome. So love that episode.
That's good stuff.
And also, sorry, before we go further into season 2, I also wanted to mention in season 1, let Bartlett be Bartlett. That episode, like I know we made fun of that phrase when the president starts to become like a pompous ass and stuff.
Yeah.
But in season 1, when he like the message of that episode was to like Leo was talking about like your presidency is more important than re-election, and it was a really hype scene at the end of that episode. So that's on my list of favorite episodes as well from season 1.
I totally agree. I love that, and I love that whole theming as well, like you said, in terms of like that character, that idea. Yeah, like don't get caught up in the re-election of it all, and like do the right thing, and then because that's what matters.
And then he ends up getting caught up in re-election.
The re-election of it all.
Yeah. Unfortunate. Season 2, I believe it is season 2, has the Thanksgiving episode, which I think is very sweet. It has one of my favorite moments. I call it the Thanksgiving episode. It's not really. So I call it the Thanksgiving episode because there's like a whole subplot. It's like a fucking D plot in the episode of the president being like, oh, like I need a new carving knife or whatever.
Yeah.
And he's just having Charlie like help him work on it, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it has like one of my all-time fucking favorite moments at the end of the episode when the president gives like a big speech about how like his carving knife was given to him by his father, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then he like gives Charlie like the knife, and he's like, I want you to have this, whatever. I think that moment is fucking so sweet. And just a bit of fun fact for you guys, on the West Wing Weekly podcast, it kind of became a meme because so the two hosts of that podcast, there's one guy named Richie who
love him.
Yeah, Carol knows. He also guest starred on the Gilmore Guys podcast a lot. Super sweet, really nice guy, massive super fan of this show. And his co-host is Joshua Malina, who plays Will Bailey on the West Wing. They know each other, and so they're doing it together, and etc. But when it got to that episode, like at the end of that episode, where they're like talking about it, Rishi was like crying, like he was so like he was like, this is such like an emotional, great moment, and Josh was like, yeah, like it's a good moment, dude, but like Jesus Christ, like relax. And then Rishi started like through tears being like, but he gave him the knife, and then like that became a meme, so much so that they ended up selling a t-shirt that said he gave him the knife on it with like it's like a whole design. And yeah, so I just like that is a very sweet episode that I really like, and I think there's a couple of moments in season 2 between the president and Charlie that I think are really nice, but just the meme of it all is also hilarious. So,
is this also the episode where CJ has to deal with the turkey?
Yes.
Or is
Yeah.
it different?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Pardoning the turkey, which turkey is gonna not die or whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that a real thing?
Yes.
Because that's like that's absurd.
Yes.
But I loved it.
Of course it is.
Of course it is. Of course.
Oh, of course. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Sorkin's talked about how a lot of the like sillier plots and stuff that ever pop up in the show, he's like, so much of the stuff that we found in research, it's like if I had pitched it without doing the research, they would have been like, this is too stupid. But he was like, so much of it is just like real, you know what I mean? And
What
so he was like,
happens in
yeah,
real
I mean,
politics.
he's like, why even come up with shit when like what happens in real politics is so fucking dumb half the time? Like you can just transfer it over so easily. Okay, so if we're talking about season 2, I gotta talk about probably my second favorite episode in season 2, which is 17 People, which is a bottle episode, which I know sometimes
It is?
kinda. It's kind of a bottle episode. I know sometimes bottle episodes get a lot of flack. I'm here to say I love bottle episodes. Fly,
Yeah, me too.
great episode of television.
I'm a Fly enjoyer as well.
I am also.
What is
I'll die on this show.
What is Fly? It's an episode of Breaking Bad. It's very divisive, but I love it.
It's like everyone's least favorite episode because it's just like Walt trying to kill a fly, and like the story centers around that. But it's about the themes.
Yeah,
it's not about the plot.
That's the thing. Bottle episodes, I'm like, people that don't like bottle episodes, I'm like, well, you're telling me so much about the way that you watch movies and television then. Because like people that don't, I feel like they're very plot heavy people. They're like, we got to go to a place and do a thing. And what's so great about bottle episodes is it's literally just the characters doing character stuff and like just vibing in a very character-y way.
Community also has a really great bottle episode, I think, in season 2, where they lock themselves in the study room because someone stole Annie's pen.
Yeah. Yep. That's a great one.
Another great one. But yeah, this is also on my list of favorite episodes.
Great. So
And
this
this is the one that like sparks that 8 episode like arc, right?
yeah, to
End of season two.
end season 2. So this is the episode where Toby finds out. Basically, is what it is, where Toby finds out about the MS thing. And there's so many great moments in this episode, like between Toby and the president. Like that whole thing is great. There's also my favorite Josh and Donna moment of the entire show is in this episode. There's a very sweet moment.
Do they end up together? They're so weird.
Okay.
I have so many thoughts
Okay.
about their relationship.
We miss it. Let's talk about this now. Okay. So,
It's so inappropriate.
you know how in Gilmore Girls,
Okay.
you know how the pilot of Gilmore Girls, the
Uh-huh.
original pilot, Luke was not Luke. Luke was just like a woman that was a friend of Lorelai's, right? Mm-hmm. And then eventually the studio was like, no, make that a man. And then they made it Luke. And then because of like him being a man and like the chemistry between Lauren Graham and Scott Patterson, that ends up becoming like the defining relationship of that show. One of the few defining relationships of that show. So kind of a similar thing happened here because Donna was just supposed to be like a nothing character that was just originally there just for like Josh when he's doing his own things to like have someone to talk to. And the actress that they cast to play Donna, everybody really loved. Sorkin loved her, and he was like, oh, like I want to give her more work and like include her in the show more. So she ended up like having more to do as the show went on. But then like originally it wasn't supposed to be a love interest thing at all. Like Sorkin has talked about it. But the problem is because the actor who plays Josh, whose name Bradley Whitford, and Donna, like, they have pretty good natural chemistry. Like, even without the dialogue being like suggestive or anything, they just have good chemistry between them. The internet did what the internet did, and it started to ship them. Very much like another TV show right now called The Bear with fucking Carmi and Sydney, and everybody's like, when are these two gonna end up together? And I'm like, what show are you watching that you like? Just because these two have a good vibe together doesn't mean they need to date. Anyway, so the internet started shipping them, which then led to like increased studio pressure to be like, you need a will they won't they relationship on the show. And Sorkin was like very hesitant about that, and he was like, I fucking hate that so much. And I guess they all like talked about it, and Sorkin and the actors and whatever, and the actors were like, yeah, whatever, like, we have good chemistry, sure, like, if we want to incorporate that in the show, we can incorporate that in the show type thing. And so slowly it started to transition into like a will they won't they, much to the chagrin of kind of everyone, thanks to people shipping on the internet / studio executives being like, we need to have more horny elements to this show. So that's like where it came from, and why it is like weird and inappropriate is because it was never supposed to be that way, because it's like she's literally his assistant, and it's like very odd. But like outside of that, you know, like throw that all out, understanding that it's not supposed to be that way and it is stupid. There is a really sweet moment between them in 17 People that I like. That doesn't even have to be romantic. It doesn't even have to be a romantic. It could just be like, we work together and this is like a nice friendship like moment of like, I care about you. But of course, because like that was the intention, they play it up in a really horny way, and so it's very horny. And it gets worse, like, because then like, dude, you want to talk about like how bad the end of season 4 is? I mean, we didn't say it's bad, but it is. But like to get there and to have like that moment with the Massive Effect song playing in the background, and she's fucking, Donna's talking to what's her name, and the what's her name is like, you love Josh, don't you? And it's like this really big, like, dramatic moment. It's like, what's she gonna say? And I'm like, this is so not West
Wing. That's when I was like, whoa, we're really just saying it now, huh?
So weird. I'll let you guys know what happens in the later seasons with that.
Yeah, please do.
I will when we get to like the later parts. But the moment, I'm gonna go to the script book here. I want to talk about the moment that I like between them in this episode, because there's like, once again, I think something Sorkin does really well is he's really good at setting up like a D-plot joke that then like pays off in a way that you didn't expect, where you're like, oh, you actually did something with that. It wasn't just like a running gag. You brought it back in a way that's actually like kind of interesting, and now I understand why it was there the whole time. But so in this episode, 17 People, there's this like running joke about Donna being late to like her first day of work with Josh or something like that, and Josh doesn't ever know the full story. And so finally, this bottle episode, they're like stuck working late or whatever, and they're talking, and Josh has been like teasing her and giving her shit the whole episode, like, fucking, you showed up late to your first day, like, that's so hilarious, whatever. And then it eventually turns out that she reveals that she was in a car accident. Josh is like, what the fuck? And he's like, yeah, like, she's like, yeah, I was in a car accident, and then like my boyfriend came, but he had to stop to like get a beer first or something like that, which is ridiculous. And they joke about that, and like, oh my god. And she's like, and like, I broke up with him, he didn't break up with me, like after that I broke up with him type thing, etc. But it ends with this really nice moment between the two of them where after like Josh is teasing her about that, Josh says, like, as he's walking out of the room, he says, hey, I'm just saying, by the way, like, if you were in a car accident, I wouldn't stop for a beer. And then Donna turns around and says, well, if you were in a car accident, I wouldn't stop for red lights. And that's the end of the scene. Oh, yeah. And I was like, that is a great fucking piece of dialogue that is in a relationship that should not exist. But like, that's like, just throwing everything away, just throw it all away. Like, that moment, if you just showed that conversation between the two of them to someone, I'm like, that's great. Sorkin, write more rom-coms, because that is When Harry Met Sally level, like, great romantic dialogue.
Totally.
I do really want to watch this romantic president movie. I'm gonna find it. I'll let you know.
Watch it. Nothing that romantic is in that movie. That one couplet between the two of them is so much more romantic than like the entirety of the American president.
Also, because we're talking about the episode in which Toby's the last one to find out, I feel bad for Toby so many times in this show.
Oh, Carol.
I respect him as a character. I think he's doing his best. He's just having a bad time.
You are so lucky you didn't watch season 7.
I did read.
Wow, what happens in season 7?
Oh, what happened?
We'll talk about it.
I was shocked, actually.
It's horrifying. I agree with you.
Horrifying.
Toby gets the short end of the stick, which sucks because I also love him.
The actor knows it. I think he was like, my character doesn't deserve this. The people writing this don't know my character at all.
Dude, he is one of the actors that went on the West Wing Weekly a lot. Like, he did a lot of episodes with them. He really loved going back and like talking about the show and stuff. And Richard Schiff, and he's talked a lot about, he's like, that's like the best work I'll ever do in my career. Like, to have a chance to revisit it and whatever is so great. But even on the podcast, he's like, yeah, that fucking season 7 arc was bullshit. I hated it. I fought against it. I was so pissed that they did it. I was like, yeah, poor Richard Schiff.
Are we just not going to tell Dan?
Talk about it?
Or should we save it?
Do you want to wait until
Let's save it.
Do you want to wait until we get post season 4?
Yeah, I want to tell you guys all the things that happen at once.
Okay.
I want to let you guys know.
That's fair.
All right.
Okay. Any other thoughts on 17 People, or should we talk about my favorite episode of TV ever?
Okay, now I know which one it is.
Well, there's actually, like, for me, it's almost like the last 2 episodes are my favorite. Like, they're kind of one experience. Well, not one experience.
It transitions nicely.
I think it's like Infinity War and Endgame.
Jesus Christ.
Okay,
Dan. It's like Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, so 2 Cathedrals, your favorite episode?
Yeah, it's my favorite TV episode of all time. So let's start this by saying, at the end of the second last episode, Miss Landingham dies in a tragic car accident.
So sad.
Which is, I think, one of the most shocking, like, TV show character deaths ever that, like, I've ever
experienced. Really out of nowhere. Uncalled for.
Yes.
Yeah, but at the same time, it was really great foreshadowing with, like she was, like her little, like, B plot, or I guess, I don't know, C plot, whatever letter plot it was for that episode.
And this is, going back to Sorkin doing such a good job of that, of like, you never know. Is it just a joke, or is somebody gonna fucking die? Like, because it all of it matters. Nothing is in an episode that doesn't matter, where it's like, we talk about this so much where there's like an unresolved thread or whatever. That does not, if he writes something, like, it's gonna get paid off, usually. So, yeah. She dies because she bought a new car and she gets in a car crash. On the West Wing Weekly, Sorkin talked about, because they asked him about, like, wow, like, that was, like, really abrupt and, like, fucked up that happened. And his whole thing was, like, whenever he uses death and stuff, like, a quote was from him was basically just saying how, like, in life, like, death is very abrupt. Like, it's not, like, in movies and shit, there's usually, like, such, like, lead up to it. And obviously, to a certain extent, like, for example, like, you have to set up that she has this new car and et cetera, so it feels a little bit like, it still feels satisfying dramatically. But yeah, he was saying, like, that when he tries to use death in movies and TV shows, he always tries to make it feel very abrupt and not, like, set up too much, because that's, you know, that's the way it is in life. Like, you shouldn't be, like, expecting a character to die and then they die. So yeah, I thought that was interesting, and I think it's something that does persist in some of his later work, although not to the same effect. Some of his later TV work, it doesn't really hit the same way. But he does try to bring that theme back. But yeah, it sets up 2 Cathedrals, which I just think is, like, the best thing ever. It's my favorite Sorkin anything. Like, that one episode of TV is my favorite Sorkin anything, and it is my favorite episode of television. That and Seven Fishes from The Bear are, and okay, wait, and Breaking Bad Ozymandias are, that's top 3.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know. And I'm so curious to get your guys' thoughts, but for me, Dan, I know you love the episode too, because we talked about it after you watched it a little bit, but, like, I just think it's so fucking, like, airtight of an episode. Like, the way that the flashbacks set stuff up about his relationship with Mrs. Landingham, and also the way that relationship and, like, the guilt he's feeling about that informs his decision at the end of the episode about, like, whether or not he's going to run again. But then also the fact that the cold open is Leo meeting with those guys, and they're like, is the president going to run again or not? And he's like, hey, he's got a press conference on this day. Like, I recommend you come out. Like, he's not saying that he's going to run again, but also, like, Leo knows the president so well that in his heart, like, even that little piece of writing about Leo, like, to have that, and then to have that pay off with the last line of dialogue is Leo saying, watch this, which, like, at the start of the episode, he's saying, you better come out and see what happens. And then he says, watch this, because he fucking knows that, of course, the president is going to run again, because, like, he knows his best friend so well. This is the first time we also see the president, like, fully be like, why the fuck am I religious? And, like, that scene of him in the church, like cussing out God, is incredible. That speech that Sorkin gives him of just like, bro, like, he was like, what was Josh, a warning shot? Like, that was my son. Like, why the fuck why are you doing this to me? Like, I've tried to be such a good person. Why the fuck are you doing this shit to me? And his anger in that moment is so great. I don't know, dude. It is like a perfect episode. And the way, like, the callback, the Batman Begins callback to the line of dialogue where when he has the flashback with young Miss Landingham about, like, the woman's right issue on campus, about, like, the teacher that's getting paid less. And she's like, look, if you think that she deserves to get paid less, and that's your opinion, like, I'll respect that. But if you just don't want to do anything about it because, like, you're too much of a little bitch and you can't be bothered, like, then I don't even want to know you. And obviously then when he tries to bring up the issue with his dad, who's, like, the dean there, his dad literally fucking backhands him. And that scene ends where his dad is like, hey, man, like, anything else? Like, you're standing around, anything else you want to say? And he, like, wimps out and is like, no. And then the callback to that scene where he's talking to, like, the ghost of Miss Landingham, and he's like, yeah, I don't want to run for president. And, like, to have that ending moment be like, if you don't want to do it because you don't think you'll be a good president, then that's fine. But if you don't want to do it because you're scared, then I don't even want to know you. And that's, like, his last, like, for the rest of his life, the implication of that scene is, like, that's all he's going to remember about that relationship is, like, damn, if I don't try to see this through, like, our whole relationship and everything she knew about me is for nothing. Like, I'm not the person that she thought I was. Which then leads into, as Dan pointed out, a fucking incredible montage. Like, one of the best moments in the show. And it's just completely set to a song, a really great song by Dire Straits. And it's just a fucking montage. And it's great.
Yeah, and that, like, I've only seen the episode once, but you reminded me of that amazing scene in the rain with the ghost of Miss Landingham. Yeah. And, like, that scene, that's, like, the most surreal scene in the entire show. And I loved it so much. It is such, like, a masterpiece of an episode. And then I also want to say, we were talking about the speech in the cathedral. Every complaint that I aired before about, like, the rhythm of Sorkin dialogue, like, it's out the window for that scene. Yeah. Like, that is perfectly paced and just perfectly worded, and everything about it is perfect. And I have trouble deciding my favorite scene in this episode because it's just full of bangers. It's so tight, like you said.
It's so great. It's so great. And then in that little montage at the end, like, there's so many great, like moments, like the scripted moments of what has to be happening there. And, like, one of them obviously being, like, okay, so Dan, you pointed out, Sorkin has, the president has the conversation with Miss Landingham, but then that moment of, like, oh my god, we need to talk about this, because I always shit on the there's a big storm coming trope. And this is the one fucking time in cinema history where I'm like, good. Like, it's a big storm coming. The whole episode, there's a big storm coming, and it's paid off with, like, this moment of him, like, intellectually deciding he's going to run again, right? And the montage kicks off with him going out in the rain and just standing in the rain for a moment in this big storm, which obviously, you know, metaphorically, it's like rain is like rebirth and all that shit. And so he's, like, standing out there and just letting it get drenched, which is, like, you want to talk about, again, another great President Charlie moment, that Charlie, like, goes to give him the coat and just completely disregards it, doesn't take the coat, and then Charlie takes off his own fucking coat. Like, and it's in the background, and it's not, like, called attention to, but that moment of Charlie being like, okay, fuck it, if the president's not wearing a coat, then I'm not going to wear my coat either, because they're just, like, so in sync and stuff. Such a sweet moment. And then, obviously, like, the build-up to going to where the announcement is going to happen, and we had, again, Sorkin doing what he does so well with the dialogue of setting up CJ being like, hey, you're going to call on this person first because they're not going to ask you if you're going to run again, and you're going to give this, like, very bullshit answer to just, like, get into the rhythm of it and whatever. And then for him to get there and we see that person and him being like, ah, fuck that, and calling on the other person. And of course the first question is if he's going to run again. The fucking Leo moment of Josh being, like, standing there, like, not knowing what's going to happen, and Leo being like, watch this, because, like, that's his best friend. And then of course the payoff of, like, the hands in the pocket, which is, like, a callback to that moment with Mrs. Landingham when they first met. Completely dialogueless, and it's just, like, this awesome moment, and the episode ends, and I'm like, that's just, bro, that is a perfect episode of television. Like, so good, so good.
And it was so good that even though by that point in the show I had started to, like, dislike where the president's arc was going, his backstory is set up so well, and his like rationale with Mrs. Landingham of why he's deciding to run again, even though he lied about MS and stuff. Like, you're still with him in that moment.
Yeah.
It's so powerful, and it at least gives like a human reason for why he would decide, like why he decides he still wants to stand by his decision of lying to get into the position of power he has. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, it's so great. I love it.
I also liked it because it was a finale of a season, but definitely not as much as you guys.
That's fair. But yeah, it has that weight to it. It just has that weight. I adore it. It's one of the few episodes that I've like, will just go back and rewatch out of context, because you can't just watch it. I mean, outside of, the episode previously ends with her death, right? But then, like, you can just start this episode knowing that context, and you watch the episode, and it's great. It really holds up.
I also would. Like, I find it hard with an episodic drama to have a select few episodes to be like, I would actually sit down and go back and rewatch that more than once. But this one, I would. Like, I actually would sit down fully and just experience that again.
Yeah, it's so great. Such a wonderful little piece of writing. And now we get to talk about something really fun, which is cocaine. So, in between seasons 2 and 3 of The West Wing...
Is this an ad?
Yeah. Hey, everyone.
Our first sponsor.
Our first sponsor is cocaine. So, in between seasons 2 and 3 of The West Wing, Sorkin was busted at an airport with just a metric fuck ton of cocaine. Like, this man was doing more cocaine than fucking anyone. So I guess he had been doing cocaine for a long time, pretty much the entirety of like the first run of The West Wing. He's talked about it a little bit on other podcasts, but he basically says like he had actually like done it previously when he was just trying to write shit for himself and working as a waiter and stuff. But how he described it was like, well, it was never a problem because I just literally didn't have money. So like a few times a year I would do it and then I would like move on with my life. And then he says, like, once you fucking become famous and shit, and it's just at your disposal, and I can just do as much as I want, that it became a problem. So, post season 2 of The West Wing, he ends up getting busted, he goes to rehab, and as far as I know, I think to this day, he's, like, been sober since. So, that's good. But just, like, a crazy thing, and also, like, I think sets the stage a little bit of maybe why the studio was a little bit, as we get to the end of the show, like trying to push him out.
Sober off cocaine though, right?
Because
I saw that apparently, I don't know when it came in the timeline, but Wikipedia says, which obviously I blindly trust, that part of the reason that he left the show was because he also got arrested for possession of hallucinogenic mushrooms.
I think that was before, or it was around the same time or something like that.
Okay.
Or maybe that's what he got arrested for, but then he was also like doing cocaine. It was something like that. But I think during the run of the show he got sober, but then it was like the studio was just frustrated with like the fact that their fucking showrunner had been busted for this stuff. Very different time, by the way. Like nowadays, if somebody got caught using mushrooms or whatever, like I don't think they would be kicked off of a show. Although he wasn't kicked off, he fucking quit. But again, we'll talk about it. Anyway, so 9/11. 9/11 also happened in between seasons. Guys, what are your thoughts on 9/11? Should we talk about the 9/11 of it all?
Very, very tragic.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say, like, there are, like, very valid complaints about this episode, but I do respect that. Obviously, I'm sure everyone who was watching the show up to then was like, oh, it's a show about the Oval Office and, like, the West Wing. They have to do an episode addressing this at least. And I'm glad that they did an out-of-continuity metaphor of it rather than integrating it tastelessly into the plot if they were going to do it. Because the whole time, even I was like, when I started watching this show, a few episodes in, I texted you, Mark, and I was like, I just had a realization that a couple seasons into the show, 9/11 happened. They have to, like, they're obviously going to address it in some way. So I think they did the best. Like, in terms of doing it metaphorically, it was the best they could have done if they were going to do it. But that being said, with it being out of continuity and them being able to do whatever they want with character arcs and making Leo a horrible person, I obviously hated that because Leo is one of my favorite characters in continuity. So, you know, it is what it is.
Yeah, it was crazy.
It
was the response of, unfortunately, the whole world when it happened. So, like, I can't be like, how could where did they come up with this? Because it was just what everyone did, very unfortunately. But yeah, no, not great. And like, I don't know, because there was that whole then like plot line that is it in season 3 where he decides to shoot or kill that one guy from that fake country.
Yep.
That also is giving like 9/11 response vibes. And I also hated that. Like, I guess it happens because it is the US. They're going to have enemies. They're going to have threats. So like that's kind of an unavoidable part of it all. But yeah.
Yeah.
I did like the framing of it taking place in the lunchroom though. Like it's basically just a giant conversation outside of the Leo subplot. Like it's just like in the lunchroom, they have the kids on the field trip there, and like one by one, each member of the White House staff enters and has their own little like tidbit to say. Like, and then at the end, the president and the first lady come in. That was cool.
Yeah, I think I'm back and forth on this episode because obviously 9/11 happened in September, which like literally this episode was written, shot, and put together like after the first actual episode of the season was done. So like. Yeah. The response to like put together a 9/11 episode was so fucking quick for them to turn this around.
I was wondering, like, I thought seasons even started like, I guess they used to start later because like, if September 11th, I think they had to have had no time to produce this and respond at all.
They normally start like end of September, early October. I feel like so they literally like again the first episode was like in the can. And then they were like, okay, shit, well, I guess we should do something. And they put this together. So, like, there is the part of me that's like, given that, the fact that even the theming of this episode, despite the fact that, it makes Leo look like a piece of shit at the start and all that, like, the fact that the theming of it was like, don't be racist, like, so close after 9/11 happened, was kind of shocking to me. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty good that they did that. Like, half of me feels that way. But then there's the other half of me that's like, it also kind of feels like a after school special a little bit. Like there is a little bit of that like, hey guys, we're not going to be racist about this, right? Because that's a bad thing to do. And here's why
they literally are preaching to kids.
Yeah, and like
field trip.
That's the part that I struggle with a little bit. Is I'm like, I get it. You had no time to respond, and I appreciate that the message overall was a good one, but the execution of it is a little wonky and like. I think if I ever were to do a rewatch of the series, I just would not watch this episode because it's like, I know, I'm not going to be racist. That's it. Got it.
And it's completely out of continuity, so you don't have to at all.
And just to, like, how this episode feels is how all of the newsroom feels. Like, where it's like, oh, a real world event that you're, like, preaching to the audience about how they should react to and how people should react to it. And it's a little bit like, yeah, I got it. Like, I don't need you to, like, tell me that, you know what I mean? Like I'm an adult. It's like that, but like even worse because at least this was like happening. It was like 9/11 just happened and it was like, please don't be racist. The newsroom is like, remember that thing that happened 8 years ago? You're fucking dumb for reacting that way to it. And it's a little bit like, okay, dude, like I don't need that in my life right now. You know, maybe just make like a silly show. Like I don't need that. All right.
Yeah, I think that's also my problem with this show as a whole is like I wish it was just a silly show, but it's also serious because he's in charge of a whole fucking country. So
the silly moments are the best. Do you guys remember? I forget. I don't know if it's in this season, but there's a moment where there's some like English lady with a real crazy name that CJ has to like meet.
Yeah, and she laughs in her face.
Yeah, because the whole time she's like, we have to be so serious about this, whatever. She opens the door, the lady introduces herself, and CJ just instantly breaks and starts laughing. Great. That's such a great moment.
Yeah.
Isn't there also another subplot where she like receives a gift from another prime minister or president to give to the president and like she like throws it out because she just like finds it with a bunch of stuff and thinks it's trash?
Yeah, there is something like that as well, yeah.
I love like all of CJ's little subplots, her being like the Speaker of the House, being the face of the Oval Office and like the shenanigans she gets into. It was very fun.
Yeah, me too. I love CJ. I think CJ's great.
I love her romance. I love her getting a goldfish instead of goldfish crackers.
Oh,
yeah. Let's talk about the romance right now because we're in that season. We're in the season of CJ's romance.
Her other romance. Her first romance with the writer guy who just fucking disappears for 2 seasons or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, someone wants to kill her, so that kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Not ideal.
How did that start again, though? Why did someone want to kill her? I don't remember exactly.
That's a great question. Marco?
I don't remember. You watched it more recently than me. I don't know. This season isn't great.
Yeah.
Season 3, I think, might be my least favorite.
Least favorite season.
Yeah, it's not great.
I think it's my favorite season.
Yeah, but it's also because the ending subplot with CJ is good. Like, that part is so strong. But everything else around the season is
I mean, I do also like them, like, because it's obviously in the lead up to the next election, they're doing a lot of their, like, polling stuff, so they get to bring in Marlee Matlin. I like her character a lot.
I love Marlee
and her
Matlin.
relationship with Josh.
We need to talk
and I
about
feel
Manchester.
like that led to some, like, good episodes with, like, I don't know, I was on the edge of my seat sometimes. I think this season worked best for me. For reasons other than CJ's romance, although that did play a big part.
Yeah, it's a contributing factor. It's a strong part of the show. Like, CJ's romance with the bodyguard is, like, one of the stronger parts of, I would say, the show as a whole.
Yeah, but I don't remember why people wanted to kill her.
I don't remember either.
She probably said something on television that made someone upset.
Yeah, I don't even think they get into it. I think it was just, like, just some issue she said, and she started getting death threats about it, and so it was like, okay.
Yeah, I know someone was, like, emailing her or whatever, but that's all I remember.
Yeah, she's, like, being stalked when she was going to buy a dress.
Yeah.
At a store. I do recall something like that. But she may have already had the the security guy relationship at that point. I don't remember.
She did.
But,
the security guy was there. I remember.
Okay.
Because security guy was bonding with her niece or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Yes, that does ring a bell. But we also need to talk about this season has a pretty good premiere, the 2-part Manchester premiere, which is the actual continuation of the Two Cathedrals ending.
Yes, where they're on the
which
campaign
is basically
trail,
them
right?
like preparing for re-election. I think this is also the first appearance of Oliver Platt's character, who is one of my favorites. I wish we saw more of him.
I love Oliver Platt. He's one of those people that, like, I love when he pops up in things. He's so great. You can just pop up in anything. The bear. Yeah. I mean, there
Chef.
You go. Yeah.
But yeah, that I think on my list of favorite season 3 episodes is Manchester. The one I have the name of the one where CJ's romance is introduced. One sec. Posse Comitatus. I think another Latin title.
Is that
which is the?
I think
that's when
the
he
finale.
dies.
That's the finale.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh sorry, that's when he dies.
Yeah.
But actually, yeah. So I don't. It's like 5 or 6 episodes before the finale that he's introduced, right?
Yeah, because there's a whole little mini arc with them. Yeah, it goes on for a little bit.
But that arc, yeah, I just kind of made a note of that. Great.
It's great.
Unfortunately, that finale is also where the assassination takes place.
Yeah.
Not of her boyfriend, like the political assassination.
Yes, but that's okay. So this is fun facts from the West Wing Weekly. But the whole arc, like, only exists because the political assassination was going to take place. Because basically, like, Sorkin's whole thing was like, look, if we're going to end this series or this season with the president, like, doing a really fucked up thing and, like, having someone order to be killed, like, there needs to be some type of, like, retribution punishment for it. Like, we can't just end with it like that way and be like, yeah, that was a good thing you did, and then everybody leave. And so they kind of worked backwards from there to be like, okay, well, let's introduce this character and set this character up and then kill them to basically be, like, the theming of it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, like, in the dramatic sense, like, the fact that there is some type of punishment for that. And you see that affect the president when he finds out when they're at the play, and then he gets out after and he's talking to the guy that's running on the Republican side, which is I love that moment. That moment between the two of them, I think, is really strong. And you can see it's, like, pretty shaken up about this bodyguard being killed. And then, obviously, of course, like, it sucks that it had to happen to CJ, but it was a nice little journey for her to go on as well. Nice little character moment. Listen, I'm going to say this, though. The needle drop at the end of Two Cathedrals is so good, but the Hallelujah needle drop at this point, to me, was a little bit like, isn't this a little late? Maybe it's not. Maybe this is, like, prime Hallelujah. Maybe I'm just too old and I've seen too many needle drops of that, but
But this is when I think it was the same year that the Hallelujah in Shrek needle drop happened.
Okay, then it wasn't late.
So
you know what?
It was topical.
It was right on the money. But to me, watching this, when I watched it in 2017,
no, I know.
was
it's
like...
happened a million times now.
Yeah, I was like, this does not age well. The fact that there's a Hallelujah needle drop in here.
Yeah, I will say, like, a lot of the needle drops I did find cheesy. I have I don't know if we're talking about the same needle drop, but I do have a note when I was watching the Two Cathedrals episode that just says, not them all walking to the car with this Band of Brothers song, LMAO. So that might be the one that you liked that I didn't.
It is.
Yeah,
it is. It's a Dire Straits song.
This is so silly.
It's a Dire Straits song. It's a good song.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like as much as you think this is like an Endgame type
or it's
episode,
a Dark Knight.
They're not superheroes.
No, they're not.
No, not in that way. That's not what I meant when I compared it to a superhero.
No, I know, but like I feel like the framing of like such dramatic music with them like all walking to the car gave off like a superhero Avengers Assemble kind of vibe when I'm like, you're just dudes.
I gotta be honest, I don't remember the song. I just remember it being just music and no dialogue. I thought maybe it was like the score of the show, like in my memory.
There is a song, but I like the song more. I guess you're right from the music standpoint, but this also is like because they talk about it a lot on the podcast, so they actually like deep dive into some of the lyrics and stuff of the song, and then I've like listened to the song after. But what that song is about is interesting in terms of the way it like combines with it, because it's like the theming of that song is like from the perspective of like a soldier that's died on the battlefield type thing, and so like the theming of a lot of those lyrics going into like the president having to like deal with this fact, like first of all deal with the death of Miss Lanningham, but then also like deal with the fallout of all the things that he's done, and then have to like accept that and move on and try to go to the next thing. Like I think the theming of the lyrics work well with it, but that's also like again upon rewatch and retrospect and having listened to the song and whatever. But yeah, it doesn't have like a the theming of the lyrics and the melody are very different, like for what that song is. So it gives off an incredibly like different vibe depending on what you're paying attention to in terms of like that aspect of it. Like if you're in the moment with the music of it, the vibe is very different from like knowing what the song is about lyrically, because you're me and you fucking spent like 5 hours deep diving into that, and then it's a very different context for it after. Whereas Hallelujah is very obvious what it's about, and it's super on the nose and sad. Yeah. All right, season 4.
Wait, but season 3 also gives us Lily Tomlin, and I just have to mention it because I love her.
Yeah, that's a good call. Lily Tomlin's great. That's a great introduction to like fill out that role.
But I will say I also then made a note saying, interesting that they had a whole like racist post 9/11 episode, but in season 4 they hired a white woman who literally wrote to the White House about killing the president.
Is that the...
Because like Lily Tomlin's character at some point like wrote about some issue and like vaguely mentioned the president dying, and obviously they take that as a threat. But like if anyone but a white woman wrote that,
right,
they would not only not be hired in the role, they'd probably be fucking arrested forever.
Right.
So just interesting that they just put all that in the same season, and they're like, don't worry about it.
Yeah. And she had
history with drugs
too, I think, right?
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So like again, if it was any non-white person, they would have no shot. But
literally,
it's very muddled.
Also, the bare naked ladies were in season 3. Very important to point out.
Were they?
Yeah, like they're at the Rock the Vote. Like
event. I don't even remember that. That's hilarious.
No.
I love them.
That's great. I literally don't even remember that episode. That's great. Shout out.
Yeah. Okay, now we can move on to the next season.
All right, guys.
Yes, refresh me on how this one starts. Obviously, I remember how it ends.
I have no fucking idea how this season started. The season is... I remember 3 things from the season, okay? The ending, the Game On episode, which I love. I think Game On is the best episode in this season. And then, of course, the departure of everybody's favorite pedophile, Rob Lowe.
Wait, what?
Yeah, well...
That's in season 4.
This is season 4.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, starting in season 4, yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I remember distinctly how this season starts because
Okay.
I, for some reason, could not get through the first episode of the season, and I think I started it like 4 separate times. And they're just like, the president is doing a speech in the middle of nowhere, and then the cars all leave Josh and Donna.
Oh,
in the
20
middle
hours
of
in
20
America.
hours in
Yeah.
America. Yeah.
So I watched this episode so many times, and I was like, "Oh yes, they're once again stranded."
Wait, but
I've
Carol,
seen this.
I'm actually shocked because I would have thought this would have been one of your favorite episodes because it is like the ultimate shenanigans episode. It's the most like sitcom, like, we're stranded. What are we gonna do? Like,
I think just because I
ridiculous
kept
comedy.
having to redo it was like stressing me out, and
Right.
and like just the beginning of it was the most frustrating.
Right.
But I did like Donna having a problem solved. She did a great job. They promised some dad in a bar that they're gonna get rid of college debt or whatever,
Yeah,
or like
oh, yeah.
help pay for college. Love that for them.
Yeah, I love that.
But yeah, I don't know, something about it. It should have been
Right.
my favorite episode. It is very, very Carol coded. I will give you that, but just didn't do it.
Very.
Also, wait,
interesting.
Rob Lowe's a pedophile?
This is
Maybe.
news
Well,
to
there's a
me.
lot to talk about with Rob Lowe. We'll,
Okay.
it's not why he left the show.
Oh, is that linked?
No,
Oh, okay.
no. But like he might be. But we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Do we want to talk about Will Bailey and Rob Lowe right now? I guess. Do you guys
Yeah.
have any
Yeah.
other? Do you guys have any?
I need to know
Okay.
like, how he got such an unceremonious
Yes.
departure from the show.
Great question, Dan. Fantastic question.
Because he literally was the like top billing in the intro
I
up
know.
until his departure.
I know. So, Rob Lowe, famous actor from the 1980s, movie star, right? Huge actor. Also, had sex with an underage girl, and has like weird sex tapes and stuff out there on the internet. So,
No.
a little bit of controversy around him around there.
Okay, fair.
Also, like very conservative. So, like
Seriously?
weird that he was even on this show to begin with. I'll say that.
And
like
it just looks creepy. I've always thought it.
interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm also a lesbian. I have weird opinions about the look of men.
I don't. Okay.
He's always creeped me out. Something about his face. I don't know.
Okay.
Even on Parks and Rec, especially on Parks and Rec, actually.
Right. Fair.
But anyway, keep going.
Anyway, so lots of like weird stuff with Rob Lowe, okay? But somehow he fucking ends up on the show, and he's on this show. And then around this time of season 4, like contract negotiations were happening for the actors to re-up on their contracts. And yeah, Rob Lowe wanted like more than everyone. Like everybody was basically like, they had all kind of gone in together and be like, we as the main cast want this much money for everyone, except Rob Lowe, who was like, well, I want more than that, because like I'm a movie star, you know, I'm Rob Lowe. And they were like, no, we're not going to do that. And then Rob Lowe was like, well, then I'm going to leave the show. And basically what happened was he had like an episode he was scheduled to leave at, and that became very like publicized. Like at the start of the season, it was like Rob Lowe's leaving the West Wing and he's going to be gone on such and such an episode. And like Sorkin caught wind of that, and so to like play up the public expectations and stuff, he just like completely got rid of him like way earlier than that. Again, similar to like with the whole like death being abrupt, he was like, I don't know, he's talked a lot about how he hates that like meta side of like knowing like audience members knowing actors' contracts and like how that influences the story and like where they may or may not pop up. And so once that stuff became publicized, he was like, oh yeah, so I just decided like basically just to find whatever point I could to just kind of like get rid of him, and then that's it, he's done. Like I understand we have to pay him for the rest of his contract or whatever, but like he's leaving the show anyway, he doesn't want to be here, and I don't want to have this big ceremonious like, we all love Rob Lowe so much, like, bye Rob Lowe, you're leaving the show now. And so he was like, nah, fuck him. And so he basically just like wrote him off the show like as quickly as possible in a way that still felt like somewhat like, yeah, he's going to do something. So that's how Rob Lowe left, okay? Which again, the sex tapes with underage people and him being a conservative, like I only bring that up to say I don't even know, like he's already had such like a scandalous career, and like the fact that he even got on this show is baffling to me. And so the fact that in this moment for him to be like, no, I want more money than everyone, even though it very much is an ensemble cast, and most ensemble casts, once a show gets famous enough, all sort of negotiate that everybody gets the same amount of money. So yeah, I think it's just very in character for him to be like, I'm Rob Lowe. I can do whatever.
I find that so interesting because I feel like he kind of has, like, despite this history that I've just learned, I feel like he has such a good guy image, and I do think it's mostly Parks and Rec's fault.
Yeah.
Because even, like, they put him on, like he has his podcast.
I know.
And, like, they put him on, like, Netflix shit as, like, narrator for no fucking reason.
Yeah.
And also just because I find this interesting, the cast before the negotiations was, other than Martin Sheen, were making $75,000 an episode, which, you know, you think about Friends, they were all making $1 million per episode by the end, so it seems like nothing, but, like, they're making a livable wage, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
And after the negotiation, they all made double that. So, you know, still really good fucking money. So it's interesting that
an episode.
yeah. So it's interesting that he's like, I want more than $150,000 per episode.
Yeah.
But I guess when he was thinking about Martin Sheen making $300,000, he probably was still like, I could make that much.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was his stance.
It's so obnoxious. Like, you're making $150,000 every week. Like, fuck off. You know?
Exactly. And yeah, in terms of his like scandals being not in the public eye, I don't know how he's pulled that one off, because like
he has a great PR team.
Yeah, this is news to me. Like, I don't know.
I think also part of the thing is like it didn't happen in our lifetime. Like, it happened like Rob Lowe like hit his peak of fame in like the late 80s and early 90s, and I feel like that's when this all happened, and by the time we were born it was like
back then that was fine, everyone did it.
And then it just didn't like stick with him the way that, especially now as we get to like the modern media era, where it's just like you breathe the wrong way and like nobody will ever forget that you breathed the wrong way that one time, and then, you know, it sticks with you forever. But
that checks out.
Yeah, GG. It just didn't stick with him for some reason. But again, but also like, okay, so like weird sex stuff aside, like sex tape aside, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that he like is an outspoken conservative, just odd to me that he's on a show that is so fucking very liberal leaning in its sensibilities. Like, especially for the time. Like, yeah, okay, you look at it now and it's like, okay, it's moved a little bit to the center compared to like modern politics. But at the time, this was like a very, like, people will talk about it being like a liberal fantasy show, quote unquote. Like, oh yeah, wouldn't you love it if the world was like that? So for Rob Lowe to be on that show as like one of the main characters is just odd. I'm like, why would you want to be on it? Like,
and it didn't seem like he was phoning it in. Like,
no,
he was in the character.
Totally. Really weird. The whole thing is very weird to me. The fact that he was there from the beginning. So that's also part of the reason why when he left, and like, because for whatever reason I did know that context about him. I don't know how I uncovered it at some point prior to watching West Wing. So then when he did leave, I was like, good fucking riddance, because like I don't like this guy. Like, I don't want this guy in this show that I like. So I was fine with that. And then he was replaced by a person I love deeply, which is Joshua Malina, who is fucking great. Joshua Malina is hilarious and awesome, and obviously that is also influenced by the fact that I listened to him on the podcast where he's friends with Rishi and he talks about the show. But then even like following him on Twitter, like his Twitter bio for so long was like, I'm the guy that ruined the West Wing or something, because like he joined the show and then Sorkin left and the show got bad. But a lot of people didn't, like, he's talked about how a lot of people didn't necessarily realize the like behind the scenes of Sorkin and Shlami leaving the show, and so they just correlate his character coming on the show with it being bad. And so he would get so much like shit from people about like, yeah, you fucking ruined that show, man. That was like a great show, and then you joined and it went to shit. So, but he like plays into that, and he's always joking about it. He has a really good relationship with Bradley Whitford still. They're like very, very good friends. Yeah, and he's just all around like really nice dude who knew Sorkin from before Sorkin was famous. They like went to school together and stuff. And Sorkin has always put him in like cameo roles and things. He pops up in A Few Good Men. He has like 2 lines in A Few Good Men as like a fucking soldier somewhere. He's in Sorkin's show Sports Night. He's popped up in cameos and other stuff as well. But so when they needed someone to replace the Rob Lowe character, they called Joshua Malina, and he was like, fuck yeah, I'll come in and play Will Bailey. And then he comes in, and then Sorkin leaves the show anyway, and he's like, why the fuck did I do this? But yeah,
I guess given that sorry, you go, Dan.
I was just gonna say, I don't have a problem with him. I just like, what bugged me a little bit was how the costume department made it very obvious that he was stepping in as the new discount Sam Seaborn, like the glasses and everything. But he was fine.
Their characters were like, it was very clear that he was meant to be Sam-esque, and obviously when Sam was running for whatever role it ended up being, I don't remember, I was like, okay, I guess he's leaving, because I didn't know that in advance. But when he was first introduced, the first thing I thought was, I really hope Sam doesn't fuck this guy's sister. That was my first thought. So that never happened, so I'm glad, but that was my immediate first thought. I don't know why. I was just like, he's gonna ruin it and be a dickhead, but he didn't. That's good.
Good for him.
Yeah.
That is also a very studio kind of thing of like, again, like everything having to be the same all the time, of like, okay, well, we're getting rid of Rob Lowe, we need a character that's exactly like Rob Lowe because people like that character on the show. And it's like, well, that's not really how that works, but okay, yeah, I guess we can do that if you want to do that. So
I did really find it like touching when he got his promotion before whatever big event that was. It was also kind of giving like Avengers Assemble, but it was nice.
Yeah, it was nice. Giving
Are you talking about when he's like officially introduced into the White House staff?
Yeah.
As the writer?
Yeah.
Under Toby?
Yeah, they're all like kind of standing at the top of like stairs somewhere, dressed all fancy. Yeah.
It's cute.
Yeah.
Cute moment for him. And he's great. Listen to the podcast. He's fucking hilarious. I love him.
I actually might, despite not really liking the show. I am curious just because I love Rishi.
Yeah, they're really funny together, and I feel like you'll get so much like fun context. Like, just, it's fun. And there's great interviews with like staff writers and production staff and actors and et cetera, et cetera. So it's really good. It's a really good podcast.
Nice.
And Sorkin himself, obviously.
Of course.
Yeah, again, so besides the finale and that, like, the only memorable episode for me is the debate episode, which is Game On, which I just think is a fun episode. It's like, oh, is the president ready for the debate or not? And, like, there's this cute moment with him where, like, he talks about how before a previous debate that he did really well on, like, something happened with his tie or whatever, and so he needed to, like, get it adjusted to go on stage. And then, like, before this debate, he's like, yeah, like, I feel ready, but I just don't, like, have the hype level. And then, like, Stockard Channing comes up and literally, like, just, like, cuts his tie. Like, as he's walking on stage, and they're like, fuck! And they're needing to, like, replace his tie in that moment to, like, get him on stage as fast as possible, which is just, like, a fun little moment. And then, yeah, the debate itself is just, it's cool. And it's, like, one of the few let Bartlett be Bartlett moments where I'm like, at this point, his character has become, like, so many strange things, but, like, out of context, like, him in this debate being the version of him that we like is really great, and watching the staff like rally behind him and support him and be excited for him and all that is, I think it's a really like energetic, it feels like a season 1 or season 2 episode, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, so before we work our way to the end of season 4, I want to air out one of my major grievances with season 4.
Oh yeah, let's go.
Being that I fully, when Marco told me, or I guess told us, like when he was choosing The West Wing, only the first 4 seasons, and I was like, that makes sense because a presidential term is 4 years. So I like just assumed 100% of me that the finale of season 4 would be re-election and he would lose, and that would be the end of like Bartlett's character, and also why Aaron Sorkin departed, because like that story was done. And so for the re-election storyline to be one episode in the middle of season 4, just like a one-off, was very disappointing to me. And instead having this kidnapping arc as the season 4 finale, I was like, again, like all of me assumed it would, like, that was such a natural conclusion to season 4, right? That whole re-election arc, they made such a big deal of it with the MS and everything. It's like when the MS stuff started developing, I was like, oh yeah, they're setting up a really cool re-election arc at the end of the 4th season of this. And then it didn't happen. It was just one single episode where, yep, like the polls forgot about or didn't care about the fact that he had MS, and it was fine, and he was re-elected. That was probably the biggest disappointment, I think, of the show for me.
I think the reason they did it is because I don't think so, and I guess this is like a slight transitional thing here, but like Sorkin and the cast and everyone didn't really know that him and Shlami weren't coming back to the show until like the last couple episodes. So I think at that point, earlier in the season, there was still the feeling of like, we'll all be back for season 5. I think that's also why he asked Joshua Malina to like come on the show and take that new role, is because like I think the intention was for him to still be there. I think had he known earlier on in season 4 that he was leaving, I 100% think they would have done what you said, Dan, which is just like have him lose at the end and make it be a transition of power. But I think with the intention for him to come back, I think he was kind of like, well, fuck it then. Yeah, I guess he'll win and we'll just go from there and keep doing our thing that we do. But yeah, then things changed.
And also things changed.
Things changed.
And also the fact that the re-election was like mid-season, like I get that they were like from season 1, they were clearly trying to do it in a real-time thing. Like this season takes place during the time of year that it's airing, right? So that's when when re-election would have happened.
For sure.
I think that was like to a fault though, that they stuck so close to that instead of crafting the finale around such a big event like that. But yeah, even if they assumed Sorkin wasn't leaving, like they could have done the re-election finale and him win. Even like it was more so just
the placement
the placement within the season that was so bizarre to me.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think it's because they like to line up like Christmas episodes at Christmas time and fucking fall at fall time. So they felt like they had to put the election in a spot that made sense in real time. But I agree. I also remember watching it and being like, oh, we're doing this now? Like, and I even knew that he was going to get reelected, and that's not why he left the show at that point. Because, like, when you're listening to a podcast, there's minor spoilers that come up and stuff. So, like, I already knew that. But even still, I thought, for some reason, the election would at least be, like, closer to the end of the season. Like, it would be somehow involved, even knowing that he was still going to win. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a weird pacing choice to have it be kind of where it is and kind of, like, nonchalant. That does feel like end of the season, like, we're building up to this moment. I don't know why we're throwing it away like that. It's kind of weird.
Well, because the story's about the characters, not the politics, you guys.
Right.
But there's a big opportunity for character development.
But then when would his daughter get kidnapped?
Never. Hopefully never.
She wouldn't. That's the answer.
The thing is, she should never have been kidnapped.
Yeah, it felt like a whole different show that last episode. I was like, where are we?
Okay, so we're going to talk about this. It's time. We've made it to the end of the
Poor
Sorkin
Charlie.
years. Yeah, poor Charlie. Okay, Carol, we're going to do something fun here. I would like you to tell me why Amy Sherman Palladino left Gilmore Girls. Explain to me what happened in season 6 of Gilmore Girls.
I mean, the network just got frustrated with her, as far as I remember, and they wouldn't, like, let her do whatever she wanted, and were giving her too many notes, so she just said, okay, fuck you guys, I'm leaving, and introduced some other, fun characters and plot lines for the next whoever to figure out.
Right.
Yeah, kind of just like a fuck you.
Right. So... Yeah. So, there is so many conflicting stories about Sorkin leaving the West Wing. It is very shrouded in mystery, much like Amy Sherman Palladino. Here's how Sorkin and Tommy Schlamme...
They might be the same person.
It's because they probably are. Here's how Sorkin and Tommy Schlamme tell the story. How they tell the story is that the studio was giving them a lot of notes and wasn't letting them do the things they wanted to do. And primarily what it came down to, which is also very similar to... very similar to Gilmore, was... The show was so incredibly well reviewed. It was winning Emmys. It was et cetera, et cetera. People loved it. But they were constantly over budget because of the fact that Sorkin was obviously writing every episode and production was fucked, et cetera. Just like Gilmore Girls. The exact same thing happened on Gilmore Girls.
Yeah.
But none of the, like, creative people involved, all of the actors and et cetera, everybody was like, no, like, this is the only way to make this level of art on network TV. Right? And we're going to come back to this at the end of this being a very transitional show because The Sopranos was going on at the same time. And I think there was this stance from network TV of like, well, but the only other show that's this good on TV right now is The Sopranos, and they're not over budget all the time. And Sorkin and Schlamme were like, yeah, but that's because they make 10 episodes a year or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, you can't expect us to have a show that's this good and not have that level of creative control where we are just going to be going over budget and be late on stuff. Because, like, if we start to give that up and just turn it into every episode is whatever and anybody can write it and whatever, then it doesn't have a voice anymore. So that's, again, very Gilmore Girls-esque. That was the whole argument there as well, or at least somewhat related. Obviously, that show wasn't winning Emmys, but it was the same idea. It was Amy Sherman Palladino being like, I can't, like, give up the level of control I have because the show ceases to be the show. So, like, at that point, I might as well just fucking leave. Like, because it just isn't going to be the same show, and then I'm going to get blamed for it. So what Sorkin and Shalami talk about is the studio was upset with them. They're constantly over budget. Sorkin's had some scandals in the past few years.
Their budget was $2.5 million, by the way, per episode.
Yes. Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so basically it came down to them being like, we can't make the awards darling show that you want unless you let us have control still. And they were like, no, going forward in season 5, you're only going to write like a quarter of the episodes, and the rest of the writers' rooms are going to write episodes, and you won't have a hand in every episode and whatever, and like it'll be fine. And they were like, okay, then we're just fucking leaving because like it won't be fine, and then our reputation will be that I ran a show that was good for 4 years and then it turned bad, when realistically, like, you're changing everything about the way we do this. So that's like the best I can put together over all the different interviews, and everybody's very cagey about it. Everybody's very like, well, you know, I don't know, whatever. And like what Sorkin talks about on the podcast is he's like, look, they wanted me to leave. Like, the discussion we had was very much like, if you stay, these are the terms. But he was like, when I left that meeting with them, I knew. I was like, they don't want me to stay. Like, they want to just make their money, and they're upset with me and whatever, and I don't want to be somewhere I'm not, so I'm just going to go. So
he got Sam Raimi.
He got Amy Sherman. He got every creative person. So, towards the end of the series, very also Gilmore Girls-esque, because there was no, like, they didn't know for sure what was going to happen. They basically pulled the main cast aside, Sorkin and Shalami, and they were like, we're leaving. And very Gilmore Girls-esque, the main cast was like, well, then we're just going to fucking quit. Like, we don't want to do the show anymore because the show is you guys. Like, there's no point. And they were like, no, don't do that. Like, you guys are under contract. Like, stay, do the show, be good about it. But we're going to end. And then we get the stupidest fucking arc to end the show ever. But I think, like, in good faith, I truly think my whole thing was like, Sorkin talking about they don't want me here anymore. I think he was trying to set them up to make a different show. You know what I mean? Because like the whole time he's been on this show, he's getting the notes of like fucking blow up characters and do dumb shit and make it like crazy and whatever. And so I think his whole thought, you can even see it a little bit in, there's like the title cards. You know how the title cards are always white text on black? For this last episode, it inverts. It becomes black text on white, the title card. And I remember them pointing that out as like, oh, it's almost like the whole episode is like just completely inverting the show and being like, it's something different now. Like, we have this crazy plot line with this crazy piece of legislation that does exist but nobody has ever fucking thought of, where this person can relinquish their power but also the vice president isn't there. Just the craziest goddamn circumstances, like the most shenanigans circumstances imaginable to set up there being this Republican president played by John Goodman, who's like a famous actor that people love. And like, I really believe it was similar to Amy Sherman. Like, can we just set up a completely different show and then you guys go make a different show? Like, you guys make the West Wing you want to make, which is basically just fucking 24 or whatever political thrillers are on TV. You know what I mean? You want to make your pseudo action political thriller, go ahead and make it. Like, I don't want to be here for that. Have a new president, do a new thing, do it all different, keep whoever you want, don't keep whoever you want, we're gone, peace. And that was like the vibe of it. And it is dumb, and it's bad, and it's not a good final episode, and it sucks. I hate it. It sucks, but this is where we're at. That's the story. That is the story of him quitting / somewhat being forced out.
I mean, it was different, but I was definitely intrigued.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a different show.
I was intrigued because, like, the plot was, like, suspenseful enough to keep me intrigued in the sense that, like, I just wanted answers to the questions I never got because it was a huge cliffhanger. And we will like hopefully talk about the resolution, even though Marco has said that it's very disappointing.
Also, what drug did they give her? Did her French boyfriend give her? It was like Molly or ecstasy or something.
Yeah, it was one of those.
But like her reaction was that she just got really sleepy, I guess. Which I don't think either of those drugs do to you, but
I don't know.
Whatever.
Sorkin would know. Sorkin would know about drugs. So.
Right? Like, why would he even write drugs wrong?
Why would he write drugs wrong? That's a crazy complaint.
I think my favorite part about this episode, though, was that it finally gave Charlie something to do after seemingly, like, disappearing from the forefront for the past, like, season and a half. Like, I feel like season 3 and on, like, he really was just there. Like, he had nothing to do, which is, it sucks, because I did like him when he was introduced and in the first couple seasons. Mm-hmm. But, I don't know. He was just kind of, like, silently written off. Not off, but, like, in the background. Very background character.
Yeah.
And then, but for this episode, he plays a big part because of his relationship with the first president, or the president's daughter.
Yeah.
Played by?
He was played by... What's her name?
Elizabeth Moss.
Everyone's favorite Scientologist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the end of the show.
So what happens?
What happens? All right, guys. We're in uncharted territory.
We're in uncharted territory.
You guys don't know. Okay, so first of all, do you want me to just give you the plot beat of what happens first?
Yes.
Okay. They find her in a building or something.
But, like, kidnapped.
Okay.
Yeah. It's, like, off screen. Like, it's entirely off screen. It's, like, they're, like... like, the first episode after is them, like, dealing with it and trying to work with, like, the senior staff trying to work with this new president to figure out what to do. And then it's literally, like, cut to a news report of, like, we found her.
And she was okay?
And she was okay.
And there's no flashback?
No. No, they just find her. And it's not like, and then for the rest of the series, she has, like, so much trauma from it. And I don't even know, I don't know if we see her again, like, after, in the rest of the show.
Do they find out who did it?
Yeah.
And why?
They're like,
Well, it was the
some guys.
French boyfriend, wasn't it?
No, it's...
Who, by the way, had the worst fake French accent I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, that was very bad.
No, he gave her drugs, but it wasn't his fault.
No, yeah, somebody else kidnaps her.
Yeah.
Oh, someone took advantage of the fact that she was on drugs?
Yes.
So they just happened to be there while she was on drugs and, like, were able to kidnap her then?
It was just some, like,
okay,
cult organization. Scientology. It was Scientologists. No. It was some, like, people that were trying to, I don't know, do something. It was, like, it's so inconsequential and so throwaway. So, like, we found her, and it turns out that she was kidnapped by these people that did it for this reason. And, like, that's it. And it's not a thing. It's not like some foreign government kidnapped her and now we have, like, a whole season about, like, oh my god, what are we gonna do?
That's what I was expecting.
It's like a cult of people who, like, did it, and that's it. And, like, we get her back from them, and that's it.
Okay.
So they couldn't even take the show that was tailor-made to end and turn into the show they wanted when Sorkin left and do something with it.
Yeah.
They just, like, we don't know what to do with this either. So we're just gonna...
Yeah, this is the fantastic thing that we have to talk about, is that season 5 is just bad The West Wing. And this is why I told you guys not to watch, is because, like, the idea of the show ending with, like, and now this is a different show, is so much better than watching an entire season of, like, the worst version of The West Wing. Because John Goodman's character, immediately gone. President Bartlett comes back. He's just...
Seriously?
Yeah, he's president again.
I was gonna ask
No.
what happened.
No, remember how we were going to set up maybe an entirely different
God,
regime and maybe see what, like, a smart conservative White House might look like? No. It's just... Bartlett's back. He's back. Okay. Everybody's back.
What the heck?
Everybody's
the
there.
conflict of interest was over, so...
Yeah.
This feels more out of continuity than the 9/11.
No, exactly. Everybody's back. And this season is truly unmemorable. Like, there is not one thing that happens in the season that I can be like, and then this episode with this character arc. Nonsense. It's just, like, the worst version. Imagine watching, when you're watching the first 4 seasons. Imagine an episode with, like, a political dilemma that you were the least interested about, with character stuff that you were the least interested about. Absolutely fuck it, where you're like, goddamn. Every episode of this season is, like, a boring political dilemma with nothing interesting happening to the characters. and the dialogue isn't even Sorkin dialogue. So you're not even getting like fun quips or good jokes or whatever. It is so unwatchably stupid. It's so bad. Okay.
I have a one-line summary of
No, not yet.
all the seasons. Do you want me to read what Wikipedia said happened in the 5th season?
Hit me.
The president begins to encounter more issues on the foreign front. While at home, he faces off with the newly elected Speaker of the House, battles controversy over Supreme Court appointments, and oversees a daring plan to save Social Security.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see,
Nonsense.
Just a bunch of political things. Like, there's no, like, character, like, this character's dealing with this. It's just, like, yeah. I will say...
But even more so than the kidnapping thing being anticlimactic, like the John Goodman disappearing, that's crazy.
It is absurd.
Like he has this grand entrance at the end, and just like at least the kidnapping thing, whether it's disappointing or not, is like it's done. Like here's the ending to it. John Goodman just not being there. That's so weird.
Yeah, that's it.
Does Matthew Perry join full time?
No.
Oh.
He's gone.
He's gone.
I thought they were gonna hire him.
No, he's gone.
Okay.
What about that? What's his name? Christian Slater, I think.
Oh, I think he pops up a bit more, but no, he doesn't like do anything important.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, great, right? Okay, so here's the thing. Everyone, so like John Wells, who ended up show running after Sorkin left, and then the writing staff and et cetera, they all talk about how they were like, yeah, season 5 is a disaster. We fucking hated it. We had no idea what to do. We were just like trying to be a cover band of Aaron, and like that just doesn't work. Like there's just, you cannot do that. So season 6 and 7 are better, I will say. I would even say like probably worthwhile to watch. They're not as good as anything from 1 to 4, but like it's still worthwhile to watch because the show completely pivots focus, which is what it fucking should have done in season 5. And it becomes about the upcoming election between these two people. And it's funny because it happens in 2005 and 6, these seasons. But because they had so many like political correspondents and stuff, the show, they were kind of aware that the 2008 election was going to be between McCain and Obama. Like they were pretty like... We know it's kind of going to be like this old white man versus this like progressive like non-white person. So they end up creating this whole campaign arc over 2 seasons with Alan Alda as the Republican candidate. He pops in. And Jimmy Smits plays the Democratic candidate. And so it's a very like pseudo McCain-Obama presidential campaign. And it's really cool because you start to see members of the senior staff like leave the Bartlett administration and become... like new things. So like Josh becomes Jimmy Smits' Leo, basically. Like he becomes his chief of staff. Josh leaves and becomes that. And then Leo becomes Jimmy Smits' running mate. He runs for vice president with him. And yeah, so you start to...
Is Martin Sheen off the show at this point?
No, he's not. But what they do is they really smartly transition it to be like, all that stuff I'm talking about is the A plot, and then like the current administration stuff is the B plot. And so slowly you start to see, so like CJ ends up leaving as well, and then Will Bailey becomes the new like Speaker of the House. Not Speaker of the House, fucking what's it called? What is CJ's job title?
Yeah.
Press secretary?
Press secretary. Yeah.
Oh, Will Bailey
Speaker of the
becomes
House
the press secretary?
Yeah. So there's this really sweet arc with CJ and Will Bailey where she like transitions it to him, and it's kind of cute and stuff, and she leaves to go do other stuff, and then like he becomes that. So you start to see the transition of like the main cast now moving into what their roles will be in like this new campaign with this new person, which is like it's genuinely kind of fun. And again, it's not, I'm not saying like put this on, you'll love it, but it's like it at least is, it has its own identity. It's like a version of the show where I'm like, yeah, this is so different from anything that Sorkin was doing, and it's fun. It's like we've talked about the 9/11 episode and season 5 being like, it feels like it's out of continuity, but this feels like good fan fiction is the best way I can describe it. It's like it also doesn't feel like The Thing, but it at least is like fun. It's enjoyable. It's like fun headcanon of like what might happen in the future. So yeah, that's kind of like what the show transitions into becoming, and it's really sweet. And then Sam Rob Lowe comes back in the last few episodes. He has a cameo as well, where he transitions to like he's going to end up doing something as well with the team. Yeah, I mean that's basically it. And then ultimately Jimmy Smits wins the elections because again, like it's, you know, like Obama one, and he becomes the president, and it ends with Bartlett and the first lady, and yeah, they're off to go spend their days chilling in the sunset with their kids and enjoying life, and that's the end of the show.
They'll probably write a book if they're like any other president who's retired.
Probably.
So that's crazy that they knew that many years in advance that it would be McCain versus Obama. Like,
yeah.
If it's the last couple seasons, that would mean at least 2005, right?
Yeah.
So 3 years before the election.
And it wasn't like, I shouldn't say, it wasn't for sure. It wasn't like, it's gonna be these guys. But it's one of those things where like what the advanced polling was showing, and like within the parties, the people they were working with were like, yeah, we feel like it's probably gonna be this person. So actually within the Republican Party, it was very much like, we think it's going to be John McCain. Within the Democratic Party, again, even at that time, people were unsure, like, is it going to be Barack or Hillary who are going to end up running? So they were like trying to decide, like, on the show, okay, like, do we go with a person of color? Do we go with a woman? Like, how do we want to do this? They ended up going with a person of color to be which ends up being what happened in history. So that lines up. But it was kind of like that. It was more like, yeah, we really think the Democrats this next election are going to do something like super progressive. So, you know, do something super progressive if you want to try and like match up with kind of historically what's going to be happening. And so that's at least kind of cool and interesting that they do that. But there's also some bad stuff that happens in these seasons. So first of all, let's talk about Leo. Okay, so in season 6, and I hate when this happens in shows, it happened in Gilmore Girls as well. Fuck! Yeah. Fuck me, dude! Fuck! I can't escape it! I fucking hate my life! Okay, Leo in season 6 has a heart attack story where the character of Leo has a heart attack, like on screen, and then he has to like recuperate, and it's like, oh my god, Leo, what are you gonna do? And then he ends up becoming the guy's running mate, and it's so sweet, and whatever, okay? And then in the middle of season 7, IRL, John Spencer, who played Leo, had a heart attack and fucking died, like for real. And so then in the show, it's on election night, and it's like, Jimmy Smits and Leo, like, we're gonna win. The polling is showing that we're gonna win the election, and they go to call Leo to be like, you're the vice president, and he's fucking dead.
Wow.
From a heart attack as well?
Yes. Which they set up? Yeah, because like earlier in the show.
They didn't,
Yeah.
Fuck.
So that fucking sucks. That really, really fucking sucks. And again, similar thing happened on Gilmore Girls, but yeah, it's brutal. And I hate that.
Apparently they almost had the Republican win, but then when like Leo died IRL, they were like, well, we can't have the like Republican win and then
also Leo
the Democrat lose the running mate.
Yeah.
So they switched it.
That's fair.
Yeah. It would be too sad.
Yeah, that would be horrifyingly sad. Yeah. So that's what happens to John Spencer, R.I.P. Like, that's really sad. I will say, in 2020, they did a special West Wing, like, they got the cast together to do, like, a play of one of the episodes. I think it was 17 people.
Hartsfield's Landing.
Oh, or it might have been Hartsfield's Landing.
I think it was... Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I read about this.
And because Leo was dead, they had Sterling K. Brown play that role. Which
okay, see, really I saw him in the photos, and I was like, why is he there?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, which is cool. And it also kind of, like, plays back to the idea that, like, they were originally going to go with, like, a black president, and then that didn't end up happening. And so, yeah, it's kind of cool to have that sort of full circle moment and have him be, like, the chief of staff in that episode. And it's great. So that's what I
wonder why they chose that episode, though. Because I read about that before I got to that episode in the series, and I was like, oh, so it must be, like, one of the best episodes in the series. And it came, and it was like, it was all right. It was just another episode. Like, I don't know why they chose that one to make a play out of.
I don't know.
Like, instead of, like, I don't know, 2 cathedrals or something.
Yeah.
That'd be too hard.
It might be. It might have been the nature of, like, what can we transition to do, like, what's the most contained, like, self-contained? Because 2 cathedrals, there's, like, flashbacks, and you're on different locations, and et cetera, whereas Hartsfield's Landing, I don't even remember the episode. Does it mostly take place just, like, in the Oval Office? Is it, like, one of those more contained episodes?
They're waiting for advanced election results from this, like, tiny town of 46 people that always happens to predict the... Oh. Yeah, they vote first, and they happen to predict the winner accurately every year since 1905, so...
Maybe that's why. Maybe it's
They're just
because
kind of just waiting. Yeah.
if it's about voting, and the whole
Yeah.
thing was like, get out and vote.
It's about voting. Yeah.
So maybe that's why.
Oh, it was for the 2020 election.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense then if that's what
Yeah,
it's about.
that makes a lot more sense. I didn't put that
Yeah,
together.
that just...
I thought they just spontaneously decided to come back and do a play version of an episode one time.
Dude, okay,
Did everyone come back? Except
Yeah.
for, Leo.
Yeah. But speaking of, like, them coming back, one of my favorite things Josh Molina does is every year, he posts the same photo of, like, a group of cast members going out to dinner, including, like, Aaron and a few of the other cast members. It's like a 10-year-old picture, and he posts it every year, and he says, West Wing reunion, just to, like, fuck with fans. And those of us that have been around a while are like, Jesus Christ. But, like, there's always new fans that are like, oh my god, it's happening. And it's like, no, he does this every year. It's fucking hilarious. It's a great joke. All right. So we talked about Leo.
Are you going to tell me what happens to Toby
Yes. Carol, you have the facts on this, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Tell him what happens. I can't even say it. I cannot even speak the words of what happens.
Interestingly,
now?
I
Holy
found
shit,
this out.
Is it really that bad?
Like, I found it out in a kind of weird order. I don't even know how. But so someone leaks some really important, like, information about, like, some secret military base or space thing. I don't know. It's, like, horrible. And it ends up being Toby. And, like, it's so bad that the last thing the President Bartlett does is have to give him an official pardon for that. And that's all I know.
Okay.
Yeah. So they kind of like Edward Snowden him. So he leaks a bunch of information, classified information, and gets like kicked out of the White House, and then it's just like gone for half the season. And then yes, in the last episode, they have this like quote unquote touching moment where like President Bartlett's last thing that he does is like pardon Toby, and it's like, okay, great, thanks for that. But like that's not Toby. Like Toby, like it is truly, it's one of the craziest betrayals of character ever. To be like, yeah, I don't know. It's wild that they just basically wrote him off the show with this absolutely insane plot. And again, it feels like the type of studio note that when Sorkin was there, he would have been like, no, I'm not fucking doing that. That's stupid. Like, why would I do that? But it's that exact type of studio note. Like, what if a character on the show leaked classified information and then they got fucking removed from the White House? What would we do then? Like, okay.
Why did he do it? Like, for money? Or...
I don't even remember. I literally, I think it was like, I think they tried to give him some type of moral high ground of like, because something, it was going to help someone or something. I truly don't even remember because it was stupid. Like, it did not ring true in any way of like, there's some deplorable thing happening behind the scenes that like Toby just has to leak this information about. It was like, not that. It was not that at all. It was just like ridiculous that this information got leaked.
Yeah, because we already kind of got the good version of that when he finds out about the MS and he like is considering like he's the first of the staff members to find out, and he's considering what he should do about it. Like, should he go public with this and whatever? But if this is just like there's no morality at stake and he's just like he finds out valuable information and sells it or whatever, that is very disappointing.
Yeah, I'm sure they gave him some, again, I'm sure there was some type of like explanation of like why he felt like he had to, but I don't remember it being strong enough to be like, this is worthwhile to what happens with the character. Like, it wasn't so fucking like, this is the moral high ground of what you need to do that I'm with it. I just remember being like, that's kind of dumb. Like, why would he do that? And yeah, it's really unfortunate that's Toby's end in the show. So, and despite the fact that, yeah, like I said, season 6 and 7, again, like, there's the good fan fiction element of a lot of it. Like, you also have some really frustrating stuff, like John Spencer's death and what happens with Toby, and yeah. And then they also introduce a new character, played by Mary McCormick, who has, like, a whole will they, won't they with Will. And like,
oh, really?
Yeah. That becomes a thing for a bit.
I saw Mary McCormick was in the show before I started watching, and I got to work with her, so I was like, oh, fun. And
you did?
I realized it was when I would stop watching. Yeah, I did. But I realized I didn't get to see a single episode with her in it, so it doesn't matter.
She's really good. Like, she's great in it, but I just don't. I don't know. I'm like, all right. Again, another like workplace, and I guess like it's all takes place in a workplace, so they're all gonna be workplace relationships, kind of. But yeah. Oh, Josh and Donna. Fuck, I forgot. Yeah, they have sex. They hook up, and like, I think they hook up on election night. The night Leo dies, I think they hook up. I think it's a 2-part episode, and they hook up in part 1, and then Leo dies in part 2. If I remember correctly, I think that's what happens. I think. But I don't.
What does Kristen Chenoweth do?
She's in this too.
Yeah.
I saw that.
I don't remember.
Okay.
You know, she dated Sorkin for a long time.
Really?
Yeah, they were together for a while.
Interesting.
There's a show called show Sorkin makes after this, Studio 60. There's a character in that show played by fucking what's her name? Sarah Paulson. There's a character in that show played by Sarah Paulson who, because Studio 60 is just the most fucking. I took my diary and turned it into a goddamn screenplay show. Like, it is just his life. Like, oh yeah, these 2 guys who got pushed out of this one network, and they're like, one of them's a writer and one of them's a fucking director, and now they're going and working on this other network, and it's like, oh my god, like, and one of them had like a drug and alcohol problem, but like he's sober now, and it's like, Jesus fucking Christ, dude, like, please don't do that. But Sarah Paulson is supposed to be Kristen Chenoweth, basically, because they had a relationship around the time that show happened. And so people on the internet have been like, yeah, that's very, like, that's who that is. Like, that was what their relationship was and who that is. So, but in terms of what Kristen does on The West Wing...
Fair.
Don't remember. I don't... I remember liking her on it, but I don't remember being like, wow, what a memorable... Like, I can recount plot beats from season 1 to 4, and with this, I'm like, yeah, she was there. And I remember she was good. Anybody else?
Yeah, from what I'm hearing, season 5 to 7 sounds like a pretty miserable experience overall.
Yeah, it was. But at least, hey, I was watching it with the podcast, so that was fun, because I had the podcast episodes, and they would get to shit talk or have people on to talk about, like, why did you do this? And they would be like, well, we had to do this because of this or whatever. So that part of it was fun, at least. Yeah, but I would never watch it again. Just like I'll never watch Gilmore season 7 again. I'm like, there's just no point. It just feels too fanficky and like weird. Why would Lorelai and Christopher like get back together? Like,
oh, that's so frustrating.
It's so fucking frustrating after the years of goodwill putting Luke and Lorelai together to have Christopher come in and then be like, we're together now. It's all great. All right. And Rory's going to go cover Barack Obama's campaign. So it's once again all tied together because Gilmore Girls ended in 2007 and this show ended in 2006. So it's all connected.
Love it.
All right, guys.
Would there have been a point where both these shows were airing at the same time?
Oh, yeah.
That might be an argument against Sorkin and Amy Sherman being
they can't do it
that
all times 2.
That's not true. Sorkin, listen, Sorkin wrote the first season of West Wing. Sorkin was also writing the second season of Sports Night, and he wrote all episodes of both. So he wrote...
But could he do 3?
Well, no. But then Sports Night ended, so he needed a second show.
Oh, so he
always needs 2 shows on the go, yeah. So absolutely he could. I think so. I totally think so. There's just so many Sorkin-isms in... I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's truly, they're like cracked mirror versions of each other. It's very odd. Like,
it's so weird that they like have never hung out or talked.
I know!
It's like, why can't I find a photo of the 2 of them?
It's also so weird that the behind the scenes of so much of it is the same. It's like they really are like the same person. Like, it's very odd.
Or just Hollywood sucks in a very similar way for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean that undeniably is also true, that the studio system sucks and really fucks with people and creative process. Speaking of which, my last little topic on our topic sheet here was I just want to talk about like this show's place in like TV history and like the transition. Like, I think one of the cool things to note about the show is like I've always thought of this show as the first 4 seasons of the show, just to be clear, as like the pinnacle of like what's achievable on network TV in terms of like pure drama, because just like we talked about, like the things that hold the show back would be fixed by it being a cable TV show. This show and Sopranos were on at the same time, and for those 4 years or whatever, it was a constant like back and forth of like whoever won Best Actor, the other show would win Best Actress, the other show would win Best Writer, the other show, like they literally swept the Emmys like when they were on together. And it's just cool to look back on, because it really is this like passing of the torch of like, this is an example of like the pinnacle of what network TV could offer in terms of like good art. Like I'm not even talking about like fame or whatever, but just like good art, like really good acting, really good writing, really good directing. And then at the same time you have this other show that's like, but what if we like extended that to do it different, where we didn't have like the shackles of network TV. So to see those both on TV at the same time is just like cool. And also like imagine being our age now, and the TV shows we got to watch were like The West Wing and Sopranos during their first run. You're just watching literally like the best of TV ever, and instead we have fucking The Mandalorian and Grogu, or fucking whatever that show is called, you know? Every just bullshit Disney Plus show that gets put out. And then yeah, The Bear, we have The Bear, okay? The Bear's great. But then we also have like Rings of Power, which I don't know, does anybody watch that show? I love Lord of the Rings. Does anybody fucking watch?
I watched the first 2 episodes, and as an avid Lord of the Rings film fan, I lost interest. Like almost.
There's a Game of Thrones prequel show on TV, guys. What about the game? You know what I mean? It's just like, I don't know. It just makes me sad to think that there was a time where, outside of like all the other shows that were also on, because I think Seinfeld was on during this time too. When did Seinfeld end?
No, Seinfeld ended 98, so 1 year before.
It missed it by a year. But
you know, it did start in the lifetime of The West Wing.
Lost started during the lifetime of The West Wing. It was also the pinnacle for like sitcoms, I feel, or a revitalization of sitcoms, because you had like Friends, you had Everybody Loves Raymond, you have Gilmore Girls, is kind of sitcom-esque in a lot of its structure. So I just feel like there was just this era of, and every single show I just named is so goddamn like distinct and unique. I'm pretty sure The Wire was also on during this time.
Yeah, The Wire was another
It's just
one.
like
24.
Unbelievable, dude.
House. Yeah, it was a pretty.
But I mean, we also have everything right now. That's the issue. Like, there's equally good stuff coming out, but there's also equal amounts of shit.
Yeah,
but
that's
just
the problem.
Like, how many shows come out every month?
So
that's
like
the problem.
New shows.
That's the problem.
All the time.
Yeah. That's the problem.
So we have access to equal amounts of good, there's also equal amounts of bad.
But I also feel like that's also, and I just want to I wanted to for a sec, because we always talk about like the benefit of like the cable model of like having less shows and restrictions and whatever, and there are so many benefits.
Yeah, for the record, I think we're in a better place now. It's just offset by the fact that there's like anything can be a show with how many streaming services there are that want to jump on making their own original content, and most of it's shit.
Yes. And I do feel like a part of it is because people realized, oh, like quote unquote prestige television can be like way shorter, and because it's shorter generally can be like cost effective and easier to turn out and all those things. Like that's part of the reason we get so much more of it. Whereas back in the day, whether you're a sitcom or a drama show or whatever, like if you're doing 16, 17 to 20 something episodes a season, there's just like a level of like effort and cost associated with that where, yeah, it's not all going to be great, but it really dwindles it down in a way where it's like not everybody gets to make everything all the fucking time, and I don't have to turn on the 1 millionth prestige drama that's just the same as every other prestige drama where there's like no distinct. And then of course, yeah, you have your standouts of shows like The Bear or whatever where it's like this is like unique, like this feels like something. But I don't know, I feel like we need like another shakeup. Like I really at this point am so, and it's fitting we talk about this now, but like I'm just so frustrated now because similar to back then where we were, like there are shows that are really doing the best they can with the format, like The Bear and stuff, but then there is like everything Disney Plus has ever made, like every Disney Plus original or every Amazon original, like it's all, it's too much of that. I'm like, we need another shakeup of something to like change the medium again. Like I'm over it. I'm over the 10 episode prestige drama when half of them should just be sitcoms because they're not anything. Like this could just be a fucking network TV show. Why am I watching the high production value version of it when there's nothing like deep to it? And then it just buries my ability to find something that's like actually worthwhile because it has that, I don't know, something special to it. So I don't know. I want another shake up. Shake it up. You guys are fucking
I'm
into
watching
film
Yellow
business.
Jackets right now.
Are you liking it?
I am. It actually is kind of giving like Lost
Yeah.
if it was made now.
Yeah, you should watch it, Dan.
Yeah.
It's good. It's Yellow.
I should.
And
I'm enjoying
actually.
it.
yeah, and that's a perfect example of a show that like I almost didn't watch just because there's 10 billion shows just like it. But
Yeah.
the fact that I turned it on and I was like, wait a minute. This one's actually like good and unique, and then happened to stick with it is great. But like,
Yeah.
That's like me with Succession.
yep.
I know I should watch Succession.
I
but I'm
wasn't
kind of
into it.
off-put by like
I didn't watch the last season.
you tried it.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it at all.
I haven't seen it at
like
all.
I'm just saying,
I got bored.
one of those. It is one of those like so-called prestige shows that everyone is saying like, "Wow, this is one for the ages." Eventually, I'll get to it, but I don't know. It kind of I watched a little bit of Suits back in the day,
Yeah.
and like I gave up on it, and this kind of gives me the same vibes, but I also know nothing outside of the general aesthetic of the show.
For me, it was
So-
kind of like West Wing, where it was just like the setting wasn't something I inherently cared about, so that's why I found it hard to like
Right.
really get into it. But like you guys might like it. It wasn't my favorite, but
I just don't know.
I'll try it
Yeah.
someday.
I also got to watch The Boys. Everybody tells me I would love The Boys.
same.
One day.
One day.
One day I'll watch Toy Story 4. But like, I'll watch
Will
all
you?
these.
No, you won't.
No, I will. I absolutely will watch Toy Story 4 one day. But yeah, I don't know.
Dude, it's so good.
I feel like we need another shakeup, and I just wanted to point out what a cool moment in TV history it was when West Wing was on, and Lost was on, and Sopranos was on, and The Wire was on, and House MD. Oh my God, guys! Here's what I'm gonna say. Where is the House MD reboot? Give me some more House. That show was like crap.
I don't know. From what you were saying about that show,
No, that show is.
I love
know if
that
we-
show.
I don't know if we need
It
that.
is the most watchable TV show of all time. Like, you literally can't stop watching it. I don't know why, but it's like that. Man, that show. Bring it back.
I was obsessed with it as a kid.
Bring back House. That's all I'm gonna say. Give me the House reboot.
Do you guys remember that skit that Conan O'Brien did for the Emmys that one year? And he like visited like Lost and House and 24 and all that. Like that. Talking about this reminds me of that, because all the shows that they show on there are just so like they have their own identity and they're so diverse and stuff.
Yeah.
And I hear what you're saying for sure. Like, even if we are in a better state right now for what TV can be, like, it was so colorful with all the topics that these like network shows would cover back in the day.
Yeah.
You just kind of we may have lost a little bit.
Yeah.
Along the way.
I do.
No pun intended.
I do think.
I really didn't mean that.
He goes, I really didn't mean that one this time. No, I totally agree. I think it is just that thing of like, my biggest problem with prestige TV isn't even the format, but it's people feeling like if they do that format that it needs to have this like self-serious tone or whatever. Like I yearn for the days of like shenanigan bottle episodes, you know?
Yearn.
Like I love that. And that's why, I mean, to tie it all around, that's why I fucking love the Christmas episode of Ted Lasso, is because I'm like,
Yeah.
bring this back. Bring back episodes that mean fucking nothing. Like, I'm with you that I would rather have a show that overall is like about something rather than like purely standalone episodes the whole time, for sure. But every once in a while, just give me a little something. Just have fun. Just do something a little crazy. You know what I mean? It's okay.
Well, even
No one wants to pay for
we
that.
talked about
though.
it earlier. But bottle episodes are usually really cheap.
Yeah.
That's
the whole point.
one of the things about them. But we talked about it earlier on this episode. Like, Breaking Bad is a show where it is very much like about something through and through. But even that has a great little bottle episode that, you know, thematically still ties into the story and is still interesting.
For sure. That's
So, it's
that's
possible.
also a show that's not afraid to have some just like humor, and like
Oh
be
yeah,
silly.
There's a lot of funny and like memed moments from that
Yeah.
show, and it's still like, you know, heart wrenching at times.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I don't know. That's the thing with me is when I turn on a lot of these prestige shows and I get 3 episodes in and there hasn't been like a silly moment, I'm like, I can't. I need some silly. I need some CJ walking through the door and instantly laughing at this fucking crazy old English lady. Like, I need to have a little bit of like silliness with a TV show. Like, I can't. It cannot be the most important thing in the world 24/7 at all times. Otherwise, my brain will shut off, and I'll be like, "Yep, this is just prestige television." So yeah, I don't know. I'm ready. I'm ready for the shakeup, whatever it is. It'll be soon.
We'll see.
I just want to mention one more thing because it feels like we're winding down, but I forgot to mention something about season 4. One of my favorite episodes, probably second only to Two Cathedrals, or like the whole 18th and Potomac and Two Cathedrals like duo, is The Long Goodbye, the CJ episode, where she like goes back to her hometown to give a speech, and she like rekindles this old high school love and like checks in on her father who has dementia. It's just a very like slice of life for CJ episode.
Yeah, I really like that.
That's a very good one.
Yeah, it reminded me of Lost, of like how you like an episode would just center on one character. Like that was the CJ episode of these 4 seasons. So love that one.
Fun fact about that episode, guys: in the entire first 4 seasons, that's the only episode that Sorkin doesn't have a writing credit on.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's because it was like he literally just wasn't going to be able to get an episode out on time for some reason. I forget what. And so he handpicked someone. I don't even think it was someone on the writing staff. I think he literally just handpicked like a friend of his, like a playwright or something, and was like, "Hey, have you been watching the show?" And his friend was like, yeah, I love the show. And he was like, "Just write like a self-contained like play about CJ. Like just write an episode about that character because I have to work on like the next thing." So like don't interact with anything like broadly within the show. Just focus on this character, tell whatever story you want. And so his playwright friend was like, "Yeah, all right, no problem, dude." And yeah, that's where that episode came from. It is a very good episode.
Yeah, because the only other White House character that even partially shows up is Toby when she has like a phone call with him.
Yep.
And that's it. There's no president, no Leo, no one else.
Yep. Exactly. All right, guys. Do you guys have any closing thoughts or remarks?
I've checked my list, and that was the last thing I wanted to bring up.
Good stuff.
I have a couple of fun facts.
Hit me.
This show has won the most Emmys for like its first season. It had got 9 Emmys in season 1, and that is, as of right now, the record for a season 1 of a drama ever.
Pretty cool.
And Martin Sheen never won an Emmy, but everyone else did. Eugene Levy was almost Toby, which would have been very different, I think.
Very different. But he was very close to getting it, apparently. I do remember that fact, and I think it was literally down between, like, him and Richard Schiff. Like, it was like he almost had the role. Yeah.
And then this is just, like, more fun for me, is Lin-Manuel Miranda loves the show, obviously.
Stop.
So some lyrics in Hamilton are taken directly from The West Wing. Yeah. Because I was literally watching this show, and at one point I was like, because they were talking about Will Bailey's dad, and it says the model of a modern major general, and I was like, that's in a Hamilton song. I wonder if that's a coincidence. And then I was doing my research today, and it was not a coincidence.
Do you think that love is reciprocated from Aaron Sorkin back to
Well,
it's very well written. I hope so.
Yes. First of all, it is. Everybody does love that. But he actually was on the West Wing Weekly podcast, Lin-Manuel Miranda. They had him on the podcast. And so I did note they talked about that. And that I guess the show was super influential for him. But they did also on that podcast episode talk about how like, so when the podcast was going on, it was also prime Hamilton years, like when Hamilton was at its peak. And so they it comes up constantly, like Hamilton on the podcast does. So at least that part of his career is like very much revered by Sorkin and the people that like were involved with the West Wing. I don't know about the rest of his career.
Mary Poppins, or his stint on House MD as the guy with psychological problems who also raps. I don't know.
Oh right, I literally forgot.
I heard about this.
Yeah,
but
apparently he's also on The Sopranos.
He is.
Damn. But also when he had his like final performance as Hamilton, they played the West Wing theme song as he was bowing.
Oh my god.
That's pretty cool.
That's how much he loves it. And then I think like the most fun fact that I found is that in 2010, so after the show ended, people started to make Twitter accounts for like some of the main cast, like President Bartlett, Josh, Leo, Miss Landingham, funny enough.
R.I.P.
But Yeah, I know, right? Tweets from the fictional characters were featured on the Rachel Maddow show and CNN, and like people were like a press secretary IRL was answering questions submitted by these fictional characters, and even Joe Biden, when he was vice president, answered questions from one of these fictional accounts in a Twitter town hall. And I'm like, how did no one catch this? But
that's funny. That's hilarious.
Yeah, that was the funniest thing I found.
I love that.
Oh, and apparently the set was so realistic that Warner Brothers studio tour didn't let people see certain parts of the soundstage. Although I've heard contradicting things where like people who have actually worked in the White House are like, it frustrated me because they turned left when they should have turned right, like IRL. So I guess like maybe just parts of it were hyper realistic and other parts were, you know, a bit more artistic interpretation.
I think it's one of those things where like it was probably so realistic that the few details that weren't really bothered people, you know?
Yeah.
Whereas like if it was like all shit, then it would have been like whatever. But for it to be like as close as it was and then have like one fucked up thing is like, that's really annoying.
Yeah.
Or those people were lying about the inconsistencies to throw the
that's a big brain moment.
If anyone ever broke in to assassinate the president, they would turn right when they're supposed to turn left, and they'd be in the bathroom or something.
That's good stuff.
But yeah, those are my fun facts.
Nice. I have a couple of things I wanted to bring up, and I might cut this out for time because I'm gonna have to cut stuff out of this episode for time anyway. But I'm gonna bring it up just for us talking.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, if you guys remember on the Lost episode, okay, I went on a rant about the opening credits, the Lost, like, because it's Microsoft Word art that does a 75-degree tilt and zooms into the camera. And I was thinking about this, okay? I have a theory that I think there is a very strong correlation. It's not completely linear, but it's a strong correlation between TV shows with like really good opening credits that end up becoming like TV shows I really like or will rewatch or whatever. And I think what that is for me is that like a really strong opening credit sequence does such a great job of like setting the tone. You know what I mean? It's like you have a cold open and then you have a great opening credit sequence, and it really like sets the tone of what you're about to go into. And so in two ways it works, right? On the side of like when TV shows were appointment viewing and you would just come home and watch a show or whatever, like it's a nice way to turn off your brain about whatever happened during the day. Like a nice opening credit sequence really like sets the vibe of like, okay, cool, now I'm in this world. But then with like streaming and binge watching, a nice opening credit sequence is also a great way to just kind of like hit a reset point and be like, okay, like whatever happened last episode, we're in a new thing now, and now we got to reset. So I really like am struck by opening credit sequences. So like some of my favorites that I think correlate pretty well with shows I like are, for example, the Batman animated series one, which I know we talked about on that episode, Dan, because you even mentioned as well, like, oh, that's a really nice way to like set the vibe of like watching a Batman show, is like that little 45-second intro. But obviously Breaking Bad is, I think, a perfect example. Like, it's so simple and elegant, but it's just like every time that credits hit, it's like, okay, sick. Like we're in the Breaking Bad world. Yeah, there's like a few others as well. And then like bad ones, I would say like, and it's a show that I like fine, but like the Queen's Gambit one, I'm like, it's just, again, like typical like modern whatever opening credits that I find kind of boring or whatever. This is all to say, I love the opening credits of the show. The first time I saw it with like the music swell and the American flag and all that, I was like, this is the cheesiest, corniest ass fucking shit. I was like, I cannot. But I'm telling you, man, by the time you get to like later in the show, there are some episodes where the cold open happens, and those credits hit, and I'm like, let's fucking go. Like, it's actually like, it ends up working and being pretty hype. Shocking. We're Canadian, you know? I don't give a fuck about any of what the opening credits are, but like, I think they work really, really well for this show and what the show ends up becoming. And they use the music editing to lead into it nice. There are a lot of times with the cold opens where it'll be like, you'll have a moment at the end of the cold open that's really dramatic with like a swell of music that then like swells into the big like bombastic score at the start of the credits. And it's great opening credits. That's my theory on opening credits. Okay, I think generally they correlate with good shows generally.
I definitely got bored of it, but I did like the music.
That's good enough.
I have maybe a controversial opinion. about credits.
Okay.
And first, actually, a little tidbit I want to mention first. I definitely disagree when it comes to the end credit music, because they would,
Yes.
most of the times the episode would end with a really somber thing, and then this like cheesy upbeat music would start and completely
I totally
wash away
agree. The end credits music suck for this show. Continue. Continue.
I think my biggest problem with the opening credit sequences are when they do like these cast billing, like they just name like all the cast members and stuff, as opposed to like the Batman the animated series one, where it's just like a vignette of something Batman experiences to just set the tone of like, if you're watching this for the first time, this is Batman. You know, no one's that clueless about Batman, but it's just an example. Whereas something like this, and that is not just this, like it's very popular with shows where it's just music set to showing like it kind of takes you out of the immersion of just like, these are the real people that are in this show. Whereas something like Breaking Bad, which is great, there's no cast members, that's all just like listed as the show continues on after the opening sequence, and it's just like a little music sting and like green and crystal meth smoke to set the vibe of the show. Yeah, so that's also why I didn't have as much as a problem with the Lost intro as everyone else did. I get why you guys had a problem with it, because it's so like you said, it's Microsoft clip art. But that's also why I don't really put that much value in these extended type of intro sequences, because I feel like they kind of break the pacing a little bit. When something crazy happens in the cold open, and they're like, all right, well now I got to sit through a minute or like 30 seconds to a minute of, you know, just the same intro I've seen on every episode, and it's either that or press skip.
Right.
And I'd have to move to do that.
Yeah, I feel that. I feel like I'm with you that I also don't care about the whole like the cast side of it, where it goes through all the cast members. I feel like that part of it is kind of like, that's such a holdover from like old shit. The biggest thing with me is the combination of like the music, like does it have a good like kick-ass score, and then do they do anything interesting like graphics wise. So for me with the West Wing one, like it does go through the cast stuff, which I don't love, but I feel like the overall editing of it and the music is what works for me, as opposed to like other cast ones where it's boring. But I would just to throw out, because we're probably never going to talk about this again, some ones that I consider to be good would be like the BoJack Horseman one is an all-time for me. I think that one's great, even though it is like, it technically goes through the cast member's name. It's always like, I don't know, it's animated and it's just different. And that one changes, it does, which is cool.
I
like when they change.
Me too. I also love that.
Gilmore Girls does that.
That's why I was gonna say Gilmore Girls has a really good one. Also with a good piece of music, because like that music really ends up being like score for the show as well, like the same artist. Right. Anyway, and then Daredevil, the Netflix Daredevil show, has one of my all-time favorite. That one is a banger.
You know what? That one's great.
That one is a banger. Okay, and all these shows are shows that I love and will rewatch or have rewatched. Also, House MD, baby. House MD has got a good one. They got a Massive Effect song.
You know what's an exception? You know what's an exception to the rule, though, that you've stated is one of your favorite shows and that we all love too, is The Bear. It doesn't have an intro.
It doesn't.
At all. It's just like, it's usually just the title.
Same with Fleabag.
So, kind of
Same with Fleabag. Again, it's not causation. It's just, it's interesting to see that it is correlated in that way sometimes.
The pattern.
Yeah,
I also like the Yellow Jackets intro.
What is the Yellow Jackets intro?
It's like music and like clips
and visuals
from the show. Yeah,
yeah, music
clips
and
from
visuals.
The show. It like names the characters, but doesn't like show a picture of the like. It's just the kind of clips out of order, and it also changes between the seasons.
Got it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Final fun fact, and then we can wrap this bitch up. So, again, we might not need to keep this in, but just wanted you guys to know that this show is credited as being one of the pillars of the creation of the walk and talk. Like, people talk about like walk and talks, quote unquote.
Oh yeah.
But like, basically, what happened was Tommy Schlamme, who came on to work on the show with Sorkin after seeing the pilot script, was like, "How the fuck will anyone shoot this show? Like, you wrote a play. Like, nothing happens. People are just talking and shit." And Sorkin was like, "I don't know, dude. Like, that's not my job. Like, my job is to write. Like, you figure out how you want to shoot it." And so they ended up bringing in like Steadicam operators and like designing the sets in a way where you could like pass through walls and stuff, to to add some type of like visual flair to what was going on, because most of the scenes are just people talking, and so they were like, yeah, okay, we'll just do it like walk and talk style. So yeah, this show like really like popularized not just the technique but also like the term of it. Like people reference like walk and talks in the West Wing as being a thing. Also led to some kind of fun stories again on the West Wing Weekly podcast of like if they had like a 1.5 minute dialogue scene between two characters passing through all these rooms with no cuts, and like then like an actor messes up on like the second last line, and it's like, oh, for fuck's sakes, then they have to go back and redo it again. And so all the actors would joke about like not wanting to be the person to mess up after, you know, a minute 15 in the middle of like a really long take like that, because that's like the whole goddamn show. Yeah, that's it. Fun fact about the walk and talk.
That would be a nightmare.
That was like some of the most impressive cinematography on the entire show for sure. Whenever, and you know, it happened very frequently, which is good. Whenever there was a nice walk and talk, just kind of touring the offices and stuff, and
yeah,
kind of you get to learn the geography of the place a little bit and get into it like that. I like
it's
that.
Cool. It feels really natural, but like fun, very effective. All right, everyone, we did it. We talked about the West Wing. Thanks again for listening to the Feature Length Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to us if you liked this video, give us a rating and review. If you want to stay up to date with the latest episodes of the podcast, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the bell to be notified when we post a new video, or follow the podcast on Spotify. If you want to connect with us directly, you can follow us on Instagram at Feature Length Podcast, or even send us an email at featurelengthpodcast@gmail.com. Catch you on the flip side.